This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Do you want to dig into this chapter? It is not a short one.
Perrin has to meet his in-laws.
Oh, I got
Demira's
lots
gonna
to
get
say about
stabbed. Verin
She's gotta
takes
meet her
over
maker.
the entire embassy just because she can. It's a bit.
Spoiler, there are no Aiel in this chapter.
There's a couple of like background Aiel. Oh, there's Sulan.
Yeah.
There's Sulan.
Yeah.
Oh,
And maidens.
yeah.
There's a bunch of Perrin
Right.
stuff. But yeah, we have with us today, obviously, Morgan from Podcast of the Dragon, joining us for chapter 46, Beyond the Gate.
Chapter 46, Beyond the Gate, and our symbol is the Flame of Tarvalin. Why is it the Flame of Tarvalin?
Probably because Demira gets stabbed. We have a lot of power dynamics with the Aes Sedai at the end of the chapter between Demira getting stabbed and Verin just casually ousting Marana.
There's very little reference to Perrin, though, despite him being most of the chapter.
Mm-hmm. Well, Perrin mostly just broods, so...
Well, Perrin does brood. Perrin paid scant attention as Rand instructed a maiden. Tell Sulan to prepare rooms for Perrin and Faile, and obey them as she would me. The two Aiel women took that as some sort of great joke, from the way they laughed and slapped thighs. But Perrin was staring at a slender man standing a little way down the tapestry-hung corridor. He had no doubt at all that the man was Davram Bashir. It was not just that he was Saldaean, and he surely looked nothing like Faile, with those thick, grade-streaked mustaches curving down to almost hide his mouth. He was no taller than Faile either, maybe a little shorter, but the way he stood, arms folded, face like a hawk, staring down into a hen yard, made Perrin certain. The man knew. That was certain, too. Making last goodbyes to Rand, Perrin took a deep breath and walked up the hallway. He found himself wishing he had his axe. Bashir was wearing his sword. Lord Bashir? Perrin made a bow that was not returned. The man reeked of cold fury. I am Pera Abara. We will talk.
So imposing!
I feel parents so hard. Yeah, I was
Talking to the father-in-law.
I was super nervous meeting my wife's parents the first time. So I was very concerned about being judged. So I get where he's coming from. It wasn't, not because I wasn't noble and brought no title, wealth, or land, but I was quite a bit older, and so I was expecting to go in and really get raked over the coals. So yeah, I get where he's coming from, feeling like he's in a lot of trouble, and yeah, being able to smell the emotions right now is super terrible, and kind of almost a double-edged sword, because it's gotta really jack up his anxiety.
Yeah, for sure.
This is where I think we get the empathic Perrin. And I feel like this is a fantasy trope that we don't really apply here, but it does apply, is the overwhelmed empath. And a lot of times it's like some psychic ability, and they just it's overwhelmed with too many people, and they can't deal with it. But I think here it's Perrin's nose, and the ability to really sense the emotions, except with him it's sense instead of some sort of mental ability.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so instant, it might as well be the same thing. Sense don't travel like that, right?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, it's a useful ability, but I feel like it screws him over just as much as it aids him, and it's one of the main reasons that his relationship with Faile is so contentious, because he uses it to take responsibility for her emotions all the time, and it's the reason I would kill Perrin in a game of Fuck, Marry, Kill with him, Rand, and Matt, because I'm just I could not be with someone who would smell my feelings and then constantly be taking responsibility for them. It's terrible, and as much as I dislike Faile, I also feel bad for her, because she should have the right to work through her crazy and her unreasonableness, and then act in a reasonable fashion, rather than him running around trying to take responsibility for what she's feeling, and then no wonder she gets pissed at him.
Totally.
So back to the chapter.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, perfect. I just didn't have anything to say to that, because you're right on. He confronts him and is pretty much basically being like, so you think you're gonna get my money. You married my daughter because she's rich, and you're just a money-grubbing, think Val and Luca, think, hell, even Lord Luke.
Yeah, totally. And like, in fairness, Faile ran away as the child Verin. Very petty, very immature, had so much growth to go through. Like, the kind of man who would marry Verin is not who Davra and Bashir wants marrying into the family. You know, like, she grew a lot before Perrin came to love her and marry her, and that is who should be married into the family. But he hasn't really clued into all of those layers yet. He needs to see that Perrin knows who Faile is, not who Verin is, right?
Yeah, I never really thought about that before, but you're right. In fact, like, it's almost like he has this perception of her, and then, like, they go to see her and Demira as they're slapping the shit out of each other, and she's kind of like, you know, she prefers Faile, and it's sort of like she's declared herself as a woman, and her mother has determined that she is a woman, and therefore she's not the person that you once knew, and, you know, this guy is very different. So yeah, you're right. He expected someone very different.
Yeah.
But Perrin won't let this guy bully him, and that's one of the things that I appreciate about Perrin, and I think that, you know, he's so soft-spoken and just so much more, like, gentle and contained than the other boys, and so I don't know that it's always so obvious that he's the one that's the most difficult to bully, and almost from the beginning, I always think to the scene in the Stone of Tear where Barrelane's like, you know, you need to give this message to the Lord Dragon for me, and he's just sort of like, no, you know, I'm not going to do this for you, and I already told you no, and it's not even that he feels like he needs to, like, amp himself up to fight off someone trying to bully him. He's just so implacable about, I'm not going to do this thing that you want. I appreciate that about him.
I bet that's why he's able to resist Lanfear's compulsion until Lyran Rayad at the end. Mm-hmm. Or sorry, Sindane's compulsion. Even though she weaves it really good, it's just not in his nature to do what he didn't decide to do, as you're saying.
Yeah, I really appreciate it about him, because...
Yeah, stubborn as a young bull.
Yeah. Totally.
I want to come at it from their parents' point of view as borderlanders, because I feel like they are coming at this couple who, again, they know nothing about him other than some weird tales and the fact that he's at the head of a seemingly decent army. So, like, they expect him to be a leader. They expect him to be able to put up with a little bit of bullying. And so I see what them basically saying is, all right, if she's coming at us with a suitor, we're going to come down on them pretty hard to see if they can stand up to life, because life is coming at them hard. And if they're able to sort of stand up to just, you know, it's not even a little bit of bullying. We see Davra and Bashir buckles pretty quickly. It's not that long of a conversation.
But yeah, they do him the honor of actually taking him seriously.
It's almost like a deliberate test just to see, like, how far can we push this couple, both because of the times we're in, the country they live in, the Borderlanders that are constantly at war, and the fact the last battle's coming up, and they know this is, like, the friend of the dragon. Like, there's all sorts of reasons why they're gonna be, like, not just, oh, great, yay, go get married, have fun, like, you know.
Yeah, but the emotions are real, you know, like, Saldaeans do not do the British holding in of emotions, and if they manage to say something nice, it means a big deal, like in Downton Abbey kind of things. You know, like, Saldaeans are Italian. They are all over the place, arms akimbo with their emotions. And, you know...
Can I tell you who I always think of with Faile and her father? In Spaceballs, the princess and the king.
No!
And she runs away as she's the Jewish princess. Yeah, and he's the, like... the bumbling. So I always forget that he's supposed to be this, like, tactical genius, because I'm always like... I just always think of him as
awful.
This silly bumbling.
How dare you slander Davram this way?
But, like, you know...
No, that is actually a super fair comparison. It really is.
Right, and they give her a blaster, and she just blows the shit out of all the stormtroopers.
Yeah.
Like, relatively strong female character who, like, takes what she wants. And then you sort of got this roguish, young... he's sort of half man, half dog character who comes up to seduce her. So,
man,
the parallels are a little too good.
I'll allow it.
Oh, God, that's funny. I believe Spaceballs came out before Wheel of Time.
I don't know. What
it was the late 80s, I'm pretty sure.
Was it late 80s or early 90s?
So I'm so old, I remember that we went to the store and rented the VCR and the movie to watch it.
Well, sure, but I was renting VCRs in the 90s.
That's because you're also old.
I know. So we're all doing Spaceballs.
87.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, okay. Fair enough.
All
Fair
right.
enough. Maybe Jordan was watching Spaceballs.
If he didn't, I'm disappointed, honestly.
But yeah, so the same thing where he's like, you're marrying this princess for her money. He's like, that's not why I want to marry her. But it's slightly different.
Right. In this case, Bashir fully means it and isn't just saying it. He means it all the way down to the core of his being. And that's what Perrin's smelling. It's like cold fury. And then when he actually starts to change his mind, like, he's really changing his mind. It's not an act. He means it.
And Perrin's struggling because he really wants to make a good impression and wants to start off on a good foot, but he also anticipates that it's not going to be so great, and that's partly because the minute that they learned that Davrin Bashir was in Camelin, Faile was anxious, and so he's been anxious this whole time, and he's just kind of like, he's going to hate the fact that I'm a common person. He's expecting that she's going to marry someone who actually brings something worthwhile to the table. It's not that somebody marrying her for money would necessarily be so offensive if the person brought something worthy. He would want someone who would love her and respect her, but he also wants the good blood. He wants somebody who, has fortitude and courage and just isn't a jackass. And so, yeah, he's pretty impressed with Perrin after Perrin is kind of like, fuck you, when he's like, your marriage is, invalid. He's so offended by the notion that their marriage doesn't count. And, being like a queer person married to, a same-sex partner, I can sympathize with the notion of someone treating your marriage with contempt and making it sound like it doesn't count, and how offensive Perrin would find that, and basically being like, how about go fuck yourself? So
at the same time, I'll push back with, my daughter's underage. If you think you're gonna marry my underage daughter, you are think again, buddy. Like, if she isn't an adult, and in their society the mother decides when she's an adult,
Which,
and I know that's
so I was the underage Faile in my marriage. That was my position, was I was way too young to be making those kinds of decisions. And, I was just like, well, how about fuck everyone who can tell me what to do with my life? And, my husband was older than me, but not old enough to be wise about walking into that particular quagmire. Let's just say. He was young and dumb for all that he was older than me.
Husbands usually are.
Yeah, so it's an interesting family dynamic that they've got going there. The three of us definitely have a lot of different angles on how this does and doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, it's funny that I see myself really from the parents' perspective more than anyone else. That's how I've gotten older since I used to read these books. I used to be like, what the fuck? Get out of his business. He is marrying that girl because he loves her and she loves him. And now I'm like, wait, how old is she?
Well, okay, so you're Davram, Morgan's Perrin, and I'm Faile for the perspectives being represented here. Got it.
I kind of see it from both sides too, because I went into meeting my wife's parents fully expecting to be judged. And when they weren't judgmental, I was honestly a little disappointed in them, because in their shoes, I would be like, who the fuck are you, you creepy cougar, and what do you want with my kid? And when they weren't like that, I was just kind of like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? Because I would totally have had like 50 million questions for them about, wanting to probe my intentions and wanting to make sure that I wasn't a creep. And when they didn't do that, I was just kind of like, I felt like they were a little derelict in their parenting. And it's like, I know I'm not a creep, and I know that your daughter's mature enough to be in this relationship, but you think your daughter is a child because you infantilize her, so what are you doing?
Yeah.
Not even like, yeah. So I was disappointed in them,
Yeah.
but also glad to not have the conflict. So it was like, I saw both sides of it.
My family was very, very judgy, but they also recognized that I was making the least bad of all the bad decisions I had made lately. So they were like, okay, fine, we'll give you probationary allowance to make this work. And then it obviously worked out really well. And now I'm like, a great story at parties because it turned out so well, despite looking so terrible at the beginning. Yeah. In hindsight, I am surprised my family was able to strike that balance given the situation.
And I'll say currently I'm in a relationship where there's a big age difference, and I don't think her parents are very happy with it. So I'm also not one to really talk right now.
Or you're a perfect one to talk because you're in a part of this a part of this scenario.
That is true. I do feel a little bit like Perrin for different reasons, but where it's like I trust that she's making the right decision because she seems a responsible adult, and if you don't know that and you're her parents, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Well, and we're on the inside looking out, and that's the thing. Like, I judged the shit out of people in age gap relationships before I fell in love with my wife. I thought that they were creeps. I would have thought I was a creep, and so being on the inside of it and being like, this is a perfectly healthy relationship between two perfectly, equal people. This is knowing that I had, acquitted myself honorably. I'm like, okay, I no longer have a flag to stand on to judge anyone else or assume that I know what's going on in their relationships. I'm going to take a step back and stop being judgmental about pretty much everything without making sure to take the time to really know what the fuck I'm talking about. And if I don't have enough information, I'm going to withhold judgment rather than making so many snap judgments. It was like a real moment of personal growth for me, just because having rules change once they apply to you. So I feel like, that's just kind of being able to be on the inside of their relationship and be like, this is perfectly benevolent. Whatever her flaws, she is very capable, and Perrin's not that much older than she is, so it's not like it's really terrible. And frankly, he's the most mature of the boys, but he's still immature in a lot of ways. And so and their relationship is kind of a train wreck, but nobody has healthy relationships in this series, or most of them don't. So
and it is a world where you have to become an adult at a younger age. Mm-hmm. They have a ton of responsibility already. They're essentially kings and queens, right? They're not just or at least lords and ladies of a significant.
And we only see them for a few years under significant pressure. Like, how much growth and perfection are you really going to achieve?
So I wanted to bring up the broken crown that got mentioned here, which is the confirmation of Min's viewing.
Right, yeah.
This is the first time we hear about the broken crown and how that's related to him and through Faile to essentially Saldaea, and the fact that, like, Perrin essentially becomes king of Saldaea when the series is over.
Yeah. Davram and Dira never get to see their grandchildren get born.
No, they do die in the last battle.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. But it has to happen so that crown
Perrin can become Lord of the Two Rivers and King of Saldaea.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I mean, I suppose if the Two Rivers is going to be kind of a province of Andor, then it wouldn't necessarily join with Saldaea, but there's that whole swath of unclaimed land between Saldaea and Andor that could conceivably be joined, particularly if Elaine's children married Perrin's children, so, which I think is what she was kind of looking for. Yeah, there's possibilities there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the return of Metharim, and I see new nations growing up. I think that might be the hardest and most difficult part of the Dragon's Peace, is that it doesn't say anything. It says the current nations must keep their borders, but there's a shit ton of unclaimed land on the continent. And if the population is going to grow, which we assume it will, because trains and planes and automobiles and guns and steel and everything else, they're going to need more land. They're going to occupy those. And if a current country can't take them, they're going to have to become a new country. And then what happens? Does the new country sign the Dragon's Peace?
Yeah.
That's a whole nother thing. Like, what happens to those big, unclaimed swaths of land underneath the borderlands and above, what I'll call the lower countries? What happens to the land that opens up as the Blight retreats and those countries become the new borderlands.
Yeah, I mean, do they take kind of like a Moon or Antarctica approach of being like, well, it's like, because like the north of the borderlands, right? It's going to be, who knows? But yeah, I mean, everyone's going to work it out happily ever after, right? No conflicts, no issues.
The battle done, but the world not done with battle.
Yeah.
That line pretty much killed any hope for a golden age utopia anytime soon.
True.
Yeah, Rand's... I feel like his thing was too naive. He didn't have enough understanding of history or war or any of it to really be able to use a practical, or make a practical treaty.
Yeah, he tries to legislate happily ever after, and it's like, dude, that's not how that works.
It's really not how that works. I don't think anything he could have done could have ended.
No,
more,
it's silly
right?
to even try, honestly.
Right. Well, and I disagree. I think that's something that the gray philosophy we got in the last episode, where she was talking about, like, it's, even though eventually all treaties fail, eventually people go back to squabbling, it's not a failure if you're able to get them to stop fighting for a while and let people live for a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And that's the gray philosophy, is even though there's no such thing as a perfect agreement, everyone's going to come away from the table a little angry.
Mm-hmm.
But it's better for everybody to make those agreements in the long run.
Yeah, even a little bit of peace gives a chance for a little bit of understanding and the hope that, you know, even a few less deaths, it's all something.
Because, you know, we can all give up sometimes, but if you're not trying, right? Like, you know, that's one of those things where, fuck, peace is something we all, you know, especially now, have to strive for, even if that involves knocking some heads together.
Ironically,
yeah.
I have a question. So they're walking to go meet Faile and Dira, and they have the guy Shane, and the female guy Shane have Siswayamon headbands.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always wondered about that, because, like, you never see any Maidens of the Spear have them. Why would the female guy Shane have them? That's always been confusing to me. Do those ones ever put off the white?
I thought it was two different groups. I thought there were male Gaishain with the banners. Am I misreading it?
It says, with the start, Perrin realized that a number of them, we're talking about Aielmen and Maidens, a number of them wore the same length of scarlet cloth, or no, it must be the guy Shane. Okay, a number of them wore the same length of scarlet cloth around their temples that many of the Aielmen did. They must be Aiel too. He noticed a small thing as well. As many women as men in the white robes wore the headband, and men in the drab coats and breeches, but no maidens that he saw. So, yeah, I don't know why female guy Shane would be wearing them.
I have an idea that I think we talked about in the last episode. Was that this has to do with the bleakness, right?
Okay.
This is why Amon, anyone who takes up the headband, is declaring themselves spears of the dragon. And the maidens categorically do not have that problem, because the ones who stay with him, because they carry his honor, right?
Okay.
But anyone who's Guy Shine is in a different identity crisis. And so if they might keep the robes past their year and a day, maybe they can also take up the Siswai Amon identity to deal with the bleakness.
Okay.
And don't forget, all the female Gaishain they're not necessarily maidens. A lot of them are just normal, everyday
tradespeople and
not
crafters.
fighters.
And
yeah,
totally. Some of them are undoubtedly maidens, but not all Gaishain put this on, right? Only some of them do. So
I would assume none of the Gaishain who are also maidens are wearing
right.
it. I would assume it's only non-maiden Gaishain who have put it on.
I would assume so as well, even though we don't get confirmation.
Okay.
I think we talked that over, like, the last episode, so that's why I had such a strong, like, I have an answer for this.
Yes, we did. We talked about Gaishain who were Spears of the Dragon, but not female Gaishain, which is a little bit different because there is the whole maiden crossover thing. Because you kind of think that most Gaishain are warriors, right? Because that's you're taken in combat, but really most non-combatants.
Yeah, they raid each other, partially for Gaishain. Yeah, unless you're a blacksmith, because blacksmiths are sacrosanct for some reason,
or wise ones.
Right.
Yeah, Avienda's sister is Guy Shane, and she's a weaver.
Right, exactly. Though I do think that probably warriors are much more susceptible to the bleakness, than non-warrior Aiel.
Yeah, because they've done the violence.
Exactly. So I think that like the odds of the bleakness hitting a non-warrior are a lot lower. Not insignificant, but just lower. But I don't think we see any maidens taken by the bleakness. They either go to Rand or go to the Shido, but I don't think we actually see any go to the Shido. I think Shido come to him, but it doesn't go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
The maidens are really all about the returned son of a maiden.
Yeah, the maidens have much more willingness to accept Rand as the Karakarn, and yeah, I think it's partly because he's the son of the maiden, and partly I think there's just more solidarity in their warrior society. Like, it's never specified, but I think it's because Farderais Mai is the only warrior society for women. I think it's probably significantly larger than any of the other male warrior societies.
By a factor of 12-ish.
I wouldn't say that because I'm guessing there are more Aiel men that become warriors than women, but I still think that it's probably larger than any of the other societies.
Yeah, and Metaldur has a good point that the maidens have a path to meeting their toe. They can serve the Dragon Reborn.
Oh, that's
they
a
carry
great
his
point.
honor. That's how they get their honor back.
He gave them this thing to carry. He said they carry my honor. Like, they have a goal. They don't have to make it up. They were given a goal.
And so if they are successful, and a lot of them, that's why they're so willing to give their lives, is if they're successful at supporting Rand, then essentially learning how to fight, learning violence was worth it.
Basically.
And you pay your toe with that sacrifice. And so they don't go for the bleakness because they're like, yeah, if I can get through this.
And then, yeah, that's what makes it so rude that he is such a stick in the mud about allowing them to do that. When he refuses to let them fight, it's like, dude, this is the one thing we have to fight off, like, nihilistic existential destruction. Like, get out of here.
It's a good point. Yeah. No, that's a way of thinking about it that I haven't come to before.
Yeah, same. Yay, podcasting.
Yeah, thanks, Metaldur.
Yay.
The next thing I have is Perrin being weird about Dira.
Wondering about Perrin's threat to take on 9,000 men with a few hundred bowmen.
Oh, that is just posturing.
Yeah.
That's just pure snarling and hackles raising posturing between two alphas trying to figure each other out.
I would say that, except for the fact that Perrin kind of does go up against way more than 9,000 Aiel to get Faile back, so I almost say it's foreshadowing more than anything else.
I'll take a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah. They are way more badass than anybody thinks. It's true.
Yeah. And he's willing, and also foreshadowing for him going after Rand for Dumai's Wells. If he wants something, he will find a way to take it back, and he lets nothing stop him.
Perrin does not do strategy by numbers at all.
No, he's solid determination.
Yeah.
But he pulls everyone along with him. Like, it's like, okay, I'm going this way, and everyone's like, oh, to Verin, shit, there I go.
Yeah, right. He just forces it, but he doesn't let the strategy of greater numbers dictate what he's going to do. He's like, well, looks like I'm going to have to pull a miracle out of my ass. All right, that's what we're doing.
Making it happen.
Yeah, we see that as sort of tunnel vision, but in a lot of ways it's focus. It's like, I'm not going to let that sort of extraneous fact that I'm outnumbered stop me from my goal. We'll figure it out.
Dog determination, one might say.
Right. And then he thinks about it. It takes him a while, but he figures out the puzzle, Either it's through recruiting people or putting tea in the water, take your pick.
Yeah, no, he's got good strategy. He just has unconventional strategy.
I also like the conversation here where Perrin's like, I'm not a lord, I'm just... And Bashir's like, yeah, that's what they all say. Like, even Bashir is
that's what a lord is.
Yeah. That's how lords get made, boy.
Yeah, it's on par with Matt saying, all I did was marry the Empress. It's not like I'm an emperor.
I'm not a lord or anything. Yeah, you are.
Yeah, you're a leader of men with, like, responsibilities that mean you can't get down in the muck hardly ever. That's a lord.
Travis has been watching The Crown lately, so Princess Diana has been on there. And
yeah.
I can't help but draw parallels between Matt and Princess Diana.
Oh, I can see that from The Crown's depiction of her. Yeah. Yeah.
The sort of pretty boy commoner who sort of ends up in a marriage by almost accident with someone ready to inherit an empire.
Yeah, totally out of depth to the scale of majesty that's happening.
But yet also way better than any of the people that she's married of the family he's marrying into.
Isn't that a fucking mood?
Well, Bashir also makes a point that somewhere someone will do something or they become a lord by their deeds, which Rhodolite Aralda, he founds his house specifically because of his skill as a general. So, and people make him aware of that, like he is treated as less by certain nobility in Eridoman because they're kind of like, you're the first of your line, basically. We know that you came from the dirt, but... And
he's like, well, fuck around and find out. So
ooh, yeah, the first of your line, that's a low cut. Like, oh, hey,
right?
First. How's that line going for you, first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's some pride. It's a little bit like being a wilder, right? Like, yeah, but I did it on my own.
Totally.
And I survived. Deal with it.
Yeah, new money. I made it on my own. Look at these bootstraps.
You were just fucking born into it, That means nothing.
Yeah, I'm not using daddy's money, so fuck yourself.
Pretty much.
And then just one of my favorite quotes from Davin Bashir. A fool moans when fortune takes him down, and it takes a true fool to moan when fortune takes him up.
I love that line.
Especially for Perrin.
Yeah.
Please learn that lesson. Please listen to your father-in-law.
Seriously.
You were saying that the next thing you've got is Perrin being weird about Dira?
I was thinking about suggesting we skip the Aes Sedai section anyway, and just, move the Perrin section forward and do those together.
And now that's...
Oh, yeah, that's not a bad idea.
So and then we'll just do that in one recording, and then if we run long, we'll just come back to the Aes Sedai stuff tomorrow. Okay. Just because I love all the conversations we're going on, but it's a lot of tangents. So I want to give us time to tangent as long as we want. Aradia, you were about to tangent.
In that case, we are going to tangent on this preamble that we get here about the fact that physical abuse is appropriate family communication.
Oh, yeah.
Because on the one hand, he's all like, you don't want to hurt Zareen, you hear me, while gripping his sword, very suggestively and being like, I will cut you so hard if you hurt my daughter. And then he's like, oh, by the way, my wife might be beating my daughter into bloody pulp. We should probably go make sure that they don't kill each other. Because, that's how that works. And we see in the next page that, there are handprints and Davram Bashir is not upset. And Perrin is internally very upset about that. Robert, with the spanking and the abuse instead of communication.
I saw this great meme, and I can't remember the whole thing, and I looked and couldn't find it. But it's basically talking about... It started with trauma over generations become culture, and it used the Saldaeans as an example of that. And so basically how... Okay, I was like, Metal de Toro saying, yes, toxic culture. Yeah, their whole culture has become toxic because of their generational trauma. And so, there are plenty of cultures where it's sort of like people are good to each other, and I have explored more and more about the toxic masculinity that seems to be very present in the Borderlands. And one of the things that I had thought about was when Rand's in Shinar and he's thinking about how Egwene has a rug on her floor and how there's none on his. And I was talking a little bit with Leslie from Stuck on Arrakis about it, and how women are treated differently there and how they're put up on pedestals and revered and everything. And she pointed out the other side of it, which you don't ever see, is what happened if Rand was complaining to the other men in the men's quarters about not having a rug on his floor. What do they say? Are they like, what do you want a rug for? Why are you weak? Are you, is he getting razzed by the other men, by the Shinarans, for a desire for certain comforts? You don't ever see that, but is that what's going on there? And so this whole thing that Dira goes through, where she's talking about, a woman needs a man to be stronger than her so she doesn't detest him, that's toxic masculinity right there. And it's not 100% true. Like the whole idea of if a woman is stronger than her husband, she comes to despise him.
God,
Shoot me That's
now.
not true, but there is a certain... It's like a little bit twisted, because there is a certain bit of truth to it in a heteronormative relationship, in the sense that you've got the nice guy who needs his girlfriend to constantly tell him that he's good enough and be really sensitive about his ego, and so she needs to, you know, not overachieve or have her, you know, accomplishments outshine his, or, you know, so there are a lot of situations where women feel the need to hold themselves back, you know, to protect men's fifis, you know, and the idea that women need the men to be stronger so that they can be as strong as they are. I mean, that's just like an extra twist on the toxic masculinity, but it's not like we don't see all the time the effect of women feeling the need to hold themselves back so that men don't get butthurt, that, you know, that they're showing them up or whatever, you know, and like that's definitely a thing. And, you know, Metal Datura is saying our culture does tell us to have contempt for men who don't conform to cultural expectations of masculinity, and it's 100% true. You know, it's like he took that and then he just like added an extra twist to it to make it extra toxic.
Yeah, because it's enforcing the worst possible toxic twist as culture. I liked what Metal Datura said also, like, contempt is the death knell of a relationship. But, like...
And that isn't dependent on gender,
It's totally not dependent on gender, and it's really frustrating that the Saldaeans understand that contempt is unhealthy and don't understand that it goes both ways.
And it's so confusing for Perrin, because however rigid gender roles are in the Two Rivers, it's still very egalitarian, and so for him, the idea that, you know, he needs to show a woman that he's stronger is so alien, because, you know, the idea of asserting himself in that way, he'd be like, you know, they would slap me down because it's not my place to try to, you know, assert myself in any way. It's like men have their lane and women have their lane in the Two Rivers, but the lanes run parallel and no lane is more powerful than the other. And so there's conflict there, but, you know, there's definitely a sense of balance. And so for him, the idea that he has to somehow be overbearing or overpowering to Faile, he's just like, how about fuck you? RJ shows toxic masculinity in different forms in the different cultures. And it's not like it doesn't exist in the Two Rivers. It does a whole bunch. I mean, Rand's whole arc of needing to find laughter and tears again is a commentary on toxic masculinity, but it's like so much worse in some places. And yeah, this is something where a guy who totally has to deal with toxic masculinity, because Perrin totally does, is faced with like super crazy toxic masculinity and is like, what the fuck?
Yeah, this is a really interesting conversation, this whole chapter, because it's two different kinds of toxic masculinity trying to figure out how to interface, right? Like, Perrin has totally different expectations of what a good impression will look like to Davram. Davram is measuring him by a scale he's never seen before. They both have toxic masculinity, but it's very, very different. And then they're trying to negotiate that with respect to how they both feel about Faile.
And I would argue that it's not written to necessarily be toxic, it's just written to be two different types of masculinity. Whether or not they were necessarily a commentary on being toxic, I'm not entirely sure.
Well, Rand definitely is.
Yes, Rand is. But these two guys, this whole,
yeah,
this was again, having been raised in the South, I've met a lot of guys who would, you know, this is kind of the approach, is like, you make sure that the person who is, you are very protective. It's a very ownership type, terrible thing, but like, this is very common attitude in the South, that you get with them and you threaten the guy and make sure that he knows that if he, you know, is doing the wrong thing or acting the wrong way, you will make sure he pays for it. And it's a very, like, don't scratch my bumper, right? This is mine. Don't fucking put any dents into it or I'll come after you because this is my property, you know? That's the attitude, and it's terrible.
Well, just because it's common in the South doesn't mean it's not toxic.
Right, but I don't think it was written as a commentary on it. I think it was just
gotcha. Yeah. It's not actually a critical examination. Exactly. It just shows up.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think Jordan's being. I'm not entirely sure that Jordan's self-aware enough not to just include this as a bit of a just part of Southern culture that he experienced.
Yeah, but he gave it to us so faithfully that we can actually pick apart things he didn't even mean to encode, which is awesome.
Right.
Excellent testament to him as a writer.
Also, are y'all done talking yet? God. Stop explaining this to me.
Yes, I think it's been a while since we've had a good mansplain.
Listen, it's time for my opinion to override yours, okay? I'm just gonna go ahead and edit out all of that and tell you guys what you should have actually thought. All right? Is that all right?
We need to be careful about Seth's feelings.
Listen. I don't like being outshined on my own podcast. I come here and I work hard, and here you are, just making me feel
listen
terrible.
To those white woman tears. He's so talented. And they say role-playing is just for children. So therapeutic.
This makes me think of an Am I the Asshole that I read where a guy wanted to know if he was the asshole for being mad because his girlfriend used his power words to talk up her friend because she always tells him that he's good and important and is gonna succeed in life. Wow. And when she told her friend the same thing, he was really mad because those were his power words. And I was like, oh boy, dude.
You just set a new bar for what it means to be the asshole. That's what you just did. Wow.
Like, there you go. Your poor Fifi's. I hope she never does anything to make you feel less.
Yeah, I do like, though, I will say, with the Saldaeans and all the Borderlanders, I do like the fact that women are respected to have very unique talents that are just as deadly. I feel like the Two Rivers is like, women are valuable, but not dangerous. The Borderlanders are like, women are valuable and dangerous in different ways than men. And I do appreciate that Dira is like, you'd better be ready to smack this child around because she needs it. Like, I raised a willful child and you are going to need a firm hand. Just, I appreciate that. It's not truly egalitarian, but it's at least a fun trope inversion to be like, oh no, my child absolutely needs to be beaten occasionally in order to behave.
Don't they all?
Apparently, I'm not a parent, but
I was too lazy to beat mine. I was just like, you're being an asshole. And that seemed to work. I can't stand this whole, atmosphere, but I guess it's partly just because the idea of him having to be a certain way so that she doesn't despise him, I mean, that's at the same time, putting all these expectations on Perrin. It's like, if how he isn't good enough for her, then she needs to fuck off and find someone else. It's like, this whole time she's trying to change him. It's like, you knew what he was.
Yeah.
So leave him alone.
It's a toxic trait in a relationship to be like, I'll love you once I change you to be the way you need to be. So that's not how this works.
Yeah.
I feel like the beard kind of represents that. Is this he wouldn't have grown the beard if Faile hadn't wanted him to grow the beard and hadn't given him constant reinforcement to keep the beard. But at the same time, do we think Perrin is a better person having dated Faile as a leader? Probably the beard looks better on him. Although Barrelon might disagree. I would agree.
No, I agree. It's a maturity thing.
You don't want to change your partner, but at the same time, I want to be better as a couple than I am as an individual.
You want your partner to inspire you to be better.
Exactly.
For sure. And you want to be giving that feedback to them. I definitely have a problem where I negative self-talk myself, and so that will end up spilling over to my partner, and I will negative self-talk him. And sometimes he snaps back at me being like, could you stop bullying me? And it's like, well, but I just treating you like I treat.
Yeah.
So it's not great. But yeah, I find this whole concept of Lady Dira being like, yeah, you have to prove how badass you are or else your partner will hate you and despise you and that will be toxic is just totally the wrong approach. Completely the wrong approach to relationships. You should be talking each other up. You should be supporting each other, and you should be holding each other to a standard of growth that is healthy for both of you. Like, just because I don't model it doesn't mean I can't tell you how it should work.
My pushback on that is I've seen a lot of people who don't know who they are and get into relationships and assume that they can just, like, figure out who they are through the relationship. And I would say that's not healthy. You need to know who you are and be solid in yourself before you get into a relationship. And whether or not you need to dominate the other person, you at least need to be able to stand up for yourself and say, this is who I am. You know, these are the things I like to do. These are the things I don't like to do. Learn how to say yes emphatically as much as you learn how to say no emphatically.
My pushback to that is that I met my current husband when I was 16.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
So I have discovered virtually everything about myself within the context of my relationship. So, like, one time in a billion, you're wrong.
Well, yeah.
But the other times, I think you're super, super right.
I guess I'm not saying it can't happen within the context of a relationship. I'm saying don't depend on the relationship for that to happen.
Absolutely fair, because I rolled the dice and came up with the best roll ever, and I don't know how that worked out. You're super right. It sucks trying to figure yourself out in the context of a relationship sometimes. It's really challenging.
It's like doing a scientific experiment. Like, isolate your variables one at a time. Don't try and do 2 experiments at the same time.
Right, except that, like, there are only so many decades one gets to live on this earth.
That might be why I am single and childless at, well, unmarried and childless at 39. I try and do things.
It's hard being mortal and stuff.
I know. I'm like, I'm going to do things one at a time in the proper order. And people are like, why are you such a late bloomer? I'm like, well, you know, I'm busy.
Yes. God, totally.
Yeah, I had to do everything wrong in my first marriage, but fortunately I learned all the lessons and was like, okay, well, I'm not doing any of those things again, and now I've got a really good second marriage. So that's the nice thing about being with someone a lot younger, is that it's sort of like, hopefully this will be her only marriage because I learned all the lessons. So,
here, have an experience buff. Let me just save you from a bunch of bad mistakes.
Yeah, I think their marriage is a train wreck, though, and I think partly it's just the culture that she comes from is, you know, I feel bad for Perrin because of that, but I also think he makes it worse because he takes responsibility for her feelings, and that would make me insane.
I have the worst time with boundaries. I have so much empathy with Perrin, because I might not be able to smell people's emotions, but, like, I have that thing where I think I can read people's minds, even if I can't. So me and Perrin, man, we could get drunk and commiserate really easily.
Can I just say, I'm really enjoying the Rorschach test that this chapter has turned out to be with our relationships.
Oh my god, seriously.
Where we look at it and all see ourselves in it. It's just amazing how many angles we're coming at this from.
This is the therapy episode.
So, tell me about your relationship with your father.
Yeah.
Oh God, do I have
No,
to?
please, God, no.
Which one? So can we move on finally to my long ago tangent about how Perrin is sizing up his mother-in-law as being hot?
Yes.
She is statuesque.
And buxom.
Yes, but you should not think about your mother-in-law, but damn, I got lucky. My wife's gonna age into something nice. Whoa, don't think that. Oh my god, Perrin, stop embarrassing us.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I would probably think that.
No, I just mean Perrin's cringe. I'm just like,
Oh, yeah.
Stop, like, doing this. I don't like being in his POV for this.
I just, you know, I don't think anybody in the world hasn't looked at their partner's parent and gone, is that what they're going to look like when they're older? Nice.
I mean,
that's super fair. I just wish that Perrin was less pearl clutchy about it.
Fair enough.
I empathize with his cringe too hard. But no, that's super fair. I definitely had that thought on behalf of other couples.
Right?
Shall we say?
Well, you're not necessarily like, you're not looking at your significant other's parent and being like, yeah, I want to fuck them. But you're thinking about, okay, how is the person I'm with going to age? How are those genes holding up, basically? And it's, I don't know, it's just, it's a thought.
Is he balding? Yeah, no, that's true.
Thank you. Can we talk about something a little more technical and less relationship-y? There's a a tapestry of a woman on a horseback killing a leopard with a spear. And I was wondering if anyone knew... I assume it's just Andor? Do we have a story about which woman that is? Which probably a queen would be my guess.
I don't think so.
I don't know. It doesn't necessarily have to be like biographical. I think that they do have biographical like tapestries and paintings, but I'm sure if this is like a small room or rooms that are set aside, it might just be something that somebody decided to do because it was metal, so maybe not a real person.
Sure, just like a painting.
I mean, I'm sure it's a real person, but it's probably like a noble or a daughter heir or just, some epic hunt, not...
You said epic hunt?
Yeah.
Not what I heard. Okay.
Not what you heard. Nope.
Not what you heard.
Nope.
Maybe they were like, I don't want you to do a tapestry of me sitting in a boring chair again, or by a thing of fruit or in repose or by a column. I know what. I want to be on a fucking horse with a fucking spear killing a leopard. That's awesome.
Very like Napoleon on a horse with like way too many swirls in his cloak kind of painting. That kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you get to decide if all they need is, like your face or whatever, and then they can put you in any kind of, background.
Yeah, yeah.
Why not? Why not a spearing a leopard from horseback? Do they even have leopards in Andor?
We know there's a joke about leopards moving out of Abu Dar because the women were too touchy. And we get that from Elaine, who got it from Tom.
Yeah, but I can see where there may be more of a southern...
We've also got lions in the waste. I mean, I feel
Right.
like the big cat distribution in Randland is not what we might expect. He's just like, you know what? All that Neolithic, Ice Age, megaphonic die-off, I'm undoing that because I don't like it.
We're not going to have them evolve logically in their environment. We're just going to, put them in a blender and put them wherever.
I mean, the breaking kind of does that, though, right?
Dude thought that linguistic drift didn't happen over 3,000 years. I'm just saying. The Shan come back, no one remembers them, but they speak the same language with the same syntax, even more so than the Ilioners? Bullshit.
That drives me nuts. How does nobody know that how do the Forsaken have like a crash course in the common tongue and speak it perfectly fluently, particularly Agenor and Balthamel when they still like reek like stale boar?
Right? And the Sharans also just casually also have the same thing going on.
The explanation for Agenor and Balthamel is that they were close enough to the edge that they could actually see what was going on. That's why they got so ground down, is they were still exposed to the passage of time. They experienced the 3,000 years, just trapped in the boar. And so they watched so of course they could speak the language because they've been watching from the world of dreams this whole time, just unable to affect anything.
Alright. I guess I might be able to buy that.
And as for the rest, Jordan's explanation is the Old Tongue is similar enough and simpler. So it's kind of like speaking, like knowing, Latin and trying to speak like French.
Well.
And then the other thing is they have the printing press. And so that did he said and language was completely standardized before the breaking. And it's all just excuses. But those are his explanations.
I buy 0.
But you get what I'm trying to say, that he's just...
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
he attempted to retcon over the gaping holes in his plot, and we will forgive him.
There's nothing wrong with retconning.
He created a 100% global, homogeneous society 3,000 years ago, and then sort of mixed it all up. And I agree there should be more drift, but... I'm
also okay with not having 11 pages of poetry every other chapter.
Fair, yeah, for convenience sake. Yeah, just be like, okay, they all speak the same language because I'm writing this thing in English. Let's move on. And assume any dialect and stuff just gets translated into English. Yeah.
Sometimes it frustrates me and sometimes I'm really grateful for it.
Right. It's how much do you want that to interfere with the book itself is sort of how I think of that.
Yeah, I prefer reality. It's more important to me that things hold to reality in the sense of, consequences and what might realistically happen based upon, X, Y, or Z, rather than, they wouldn't really have been speaking this language. It's I can give a little for, it's fantasy for that. But, people who complain, they didn't make this super happy thing happen at the end, and I'm just kind of but that logically wouldn't have happened after all of this shitty stuff. So, why would we have waved a magic wand? Yeah, it's fantasy, but it's not that fantastical.
She prefers Faile, Davram. There's this whole subtext between Dira and Davram about what's actually happening. There's all this, fireworks, and then also this very subtle, quick conversation underneath all the fireworks, where they tell each other what they think about the children's decision.
Yes. Yeah, again, this is a 2 different conversation moment going on, where they're talking to the kids about their relationship, but then they're also speaking to each other about their various power dynamic and who gets to decide whether or not they stay married, or whether or not they're going to break them up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear that Bashir has decided that Perrin is strong enough, enough for his daughter. And he's like, all you have to decide is if she's old enough. And you have, so we're done here.
Right. And Dira's fighting with Faile as an adult, not as a child. So, therefore, the marriage is fine. We'll let it stand.
Exactly. And it's like that fight was actually the thing that got her the approval for the marriage.
Very much like the wise ones, with the need to stand up for yourself in order to claim your adulthood.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, that is a bit of a theme, I think, throughout these books, is no one's going to give you authority, you just need to step up and take it. You need to stand up for yourself, and you need to stop assuming that someone's going to hand you the reins to a kingdom, and you need to start assuming that to take the power, you need to expect to be given the power.
That's been, such a theme for me for the past couple of weeks, just internally. Months, years, I don't know. That's been a theme for me for a while now. Mm-hmm. That's good that... No wonder, because it's in these books, right?
Yeah, and I'm nodding. I think that's something that you could take to heart. Ouch. I could take to heart. We could all take to heart.
Yeah, for sure. It's been on my mind uppermost a lot lately, and it's very, man, Robert Jordan really does lean into that as a positive character trait, doesn't he?
So yeah, we get this final thought of Perrin being like, God, is everybody mad in this family? And everyone who's reading this is nodding. Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
yes, you are. And then we fade to black, and then we fade back in on their narrative, and it's after the meeting got down to real business, right? That was the show at the beginning, and then it fades to black while they talk business, and now we're fading back in, and Perrin's like, I just went through the ringer, and I don't know how I feel.
I sort of imagine that conversation continued in a similar vein for quite some time. I mean, we get descriptions of, how many children Dira wants, and
how to get them.
Yeah, the positions genders to have sex in, there's a certain point where I just imagine Perrin's eyes just glaze over, and he's just standing there being like, I'm not hearing what I think I'm hearing. I don't want to have those images in my head. My mind is blank.
Let me die.
Yeah. Hours.
That sounds horrible.
And he's just dripping sweat from his nose, and I imagine he's just those big pit stains and sweat on his back, worse than when he's in a battle.
Right? He's like, I would love to be literally anywhere else. And Faile is just all kinds of ebullient, right? Because she has had all this anxiety around having this meeting with her mother and all that, and now it's been resolved. The marriage has been approved. She's good to go. She was gambling up until now, and now she has the relief of knowing her parents approve, and she's just so happy she doesn't even realize how incredibly strenuous that was for Perrin.
They have the awkward Sulin taking them in and torturing herself by showing them every single thing, and then... So, I was wondering, because he gives her money to make her fuck off, and, says for a moment he thought she was going to throw the fat coin at him, but instead he got another wavering curtsy and a slammed door as she departed. And I'm just kind of so she's trying to get her toe back, or meet her toe. Giving her money was probably the most excruciatingly shameful thing that she's endured in the entire course of what she's doing to try to meet her toe. And so it's let's say she owes, you got toe on a point scale, and so speaking to the guy Shane as if they were Farderais my costs you 1,000 points of toe. How many points did she get by being given money?
I would say actually not that many, because it's not in public. it was a private event.
Okay,
And so
that's
it
fair.
was shaming, but no one saw it. So it was a very private shame.
Right, and
Okay.
she got more toe by accepting her shame than by letting her anger go and throwing it at him, right? But yeah, I think that it was definitely a matter of like, he's treating me like a servant and this is the worst and I am the worst and I deserve this. So thank you, sir, for making me feel my shame because I needed that.
And she's doing exactly what she thinks a Wetlander servant would be doing, right? This isn't her trying to do anything special. This is just her weird, distorted idea of what Wetlander servants do. Because she
Which
looks
is
down on
wrong.
them so much. Which is wrong. Which is why, you've got a lord who's not a lord.
And a servant who's not
and
a servant.
a servant who's not a servant.
And Faile is just like, what am I going to do with you?
Like, this is just the weirdest. And he's like, that was very good, honey. You told her to go away. Very, very good. Pat, pat, pat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if only you could do that with our servants. Gee, that would be nice.
And he's like, could you stop making my childhood friends and adults around me into servants? That is weird. And she's like, no, that's how it works.
So the next thing I want to do is he brings up the broken crown, and she immediately changes the subject to Rand and starts a fight.
Yeah, what is with the broken crown? Why is she so upset? Why do we never get further details on this?
She just doesn't want to acknowledge that she's heir to a throne.
I always feel like there's some big secret that's looming in the wings that never comes out, and it bothers me.
I think the idea of being queen is super upsetting to her. She specifically fled to become a Hunter of the Horn because she, as the eldest, was expected to know how to run the estate and learn how to do all of the accounts and just all of that type of work that was excruciating and horrible, and she didn't want to do, so she was like, fuck this noise, I'm leaving. And so even the thought of being responsible for such an administrative position is shitty to her, and so she doesn't want to talk about it. That's my guess. And also probably because she's already been called out by Perrin for lying to him about a whole bunch of stuff when it came to her father, and then it's sort of like the understanding between them is that she came clean and has finally been truthful about her background and where she comes from and who her parents are, and it turns out that that's a lie. And since she's actually second in line to the throne of Saldaea, that would have been some good information to let him know, and very relevant information. And so, yeah, she doesn't want to talk about it, because it's a lie.
That's funny. I never thought of her as being reluctant about the crown.
Oh, yeah, no, she totally changes the subject because she's extremely worried. Like, by the way, honey, by marrying me, I know you have a dream of being a blacksmith and getting a cabin up in the middle of the woods away from no one and everything, but, yeah, you're gonna be the king of a country, potentially.
I just never thought of that.
Like, he's already worried, like, just because your father's the lord, he says I almost reconsidered marrying her. If he knew that by marrying her, he was going to potentially be inheriting a throne?
Well, he knows that she's fourth in line for the crown. He just also knows that the queen is young and likely to have kids.
Right.
But he knows that she's fourth in line to the crown.
Except that she's not likely to have kids, because when we get the bit from Atheniel's point of view in the prologue of the 8th book, I think that Faile knows her cousin well enough to know that, she's never going to get married and have kids.
You think?
Because she's impossible to please. I mean, that's Atheniel's point of view when she's thinking about Tenobia, is that she'll die a maiden because there will never be a man who is good enough for her. And so, basically, it's eventually going to go to Bashir or to his heir. So, she is second in line for the throne because Tenobia doesn't have kids, isn't married, and isn't ever going to get married.
Huh. I did not think that. I always figured it was like, well, clearly Tenobia is going to have to get married. Duh.
Yeah, I think everyone around her is aware just how much of a spoiled brat she is and how little she's going to, accept being with somebody.
No, you guys are right. It's not that Faile's afraid of being queen, it's that she's afraid Perrin won't be king. That's the anxiety. It's not being queen that bothers her. It's that Perrin would want nothing to do with it. But honestly, what is she doing getting married to this guy without having this kind of conversation? This is not a healthy relationship dynamic.
Have I mentioned they may be a little young?
No, it's the matter of, and doing what you want to do and what makes you feel happy despite whatever responsibilities that you have. It's kind of like the same thing that I think makes Elaine decide to put off going for the throne, because she knows that it's in decent hands, and so she's like, I've got this important task to do, and so she goes off and does that because it's like she doesn't want to settle down and take responsibility, and Faile doesn't want to settle down or be responsible. It's just, they're young and they're not very responsible, and slumming it. They want to have their fun and not have to do the really hard, boring, administrative type work. The work that Egwene buckles down to, even though it makes her want to die a little inside with her piles of reports and the miserable stuff where it's like almost getting the point of views from her before, like, her getting captured and beaten is like a relief because she's doing nothing but paperwork and then like intrigue from sitters who want to fuck her over, and that's like her life. And it seems to be like that's what the Amarylline Seed is. And so, like, I guess the idea of paperwork and people who want to fuck you over is not particularly appealing, and so they want to go off and have fun instead.
That's fair. I just really don't approve of getting married to someone with a secret unexplored that inevitably has to come up.
Yeah.
Don't think that's a great call.
No.
I mean, technically it kind of came out before they got married, but
I mean, the broken crown part didn't.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah.
Just Queen's cousin. Just that part.
Yes, that part did. Yeah, she's pretty notorious for not being very honest with him.
And as we've seen, like, cousin in nobility terms can mean a lot of different things. That doesn't necessarily mean that, like, she's next in line for the crown.
True. We don't know her whole family situation.
Or he doesn't.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah.
Right.
He does not. He doesn't know that at all, and we only learn it, like, the reader only learns it in Book 8 when Atheniel just breaks it down in her internal narrative while they're waiting for Zenobia.
So yeah, she changes the subject because she doesn't want to talk about it, unlike us, who clearly want to talk about it ad nauseum.
Right. And she brings up Rand, and I think there's a very poignant quote here where she says, "Remember, he is the dragon reborn. That is very like a king of kings. And kings sometimes use up even friends, by accident and on purpose." And we've seen from his point of view, like, he thinks about how he's using people and how he has to and how he doesn't want to, but
he's going to.
She's very right. He's going to, and she's right to caution Perrin about that. Like, be careful. He's not just your friend anymore. He's something else too.
Yeah. This is also when we get the level up of her knowing Maiden Hand Talk and being able to communicate to Perrin, like, oh, by the way, this is what's going on, actually behind the scenes, in a way that, like, really gives both of them serious political strategic advantages.
Spying is a wife's work.
Mm-hmm. And, like, Bane and Chiad, like, are awkward about the fact that they taught her hand talk, but also, like, you knew this girl for how long before you broke your sacred codes? Like, come on.
They like your shoulders, but they think your beard sucks.
I love that she's getting the gossip. She's like, oh, Rand totally took off. Also, by the way, they're totally checking you out. Serious and silly all mixed together.
It's my favorite way that Jordan writes, is this, like, incredibly serious layer, but also this, like, there's a lot of silliness going on too. These are sort of young kids having fun,
And the nice thing about Faile is she is really competent, and she's smart. Rand is someone who will use up his friends. I mean, he does in the next book begin to put Perrin to use, and he immediately, I mean, we didn't read his section, but he was immediately like, hey, you want to go to Tyr? And you can't blame him, it's like you don't have very many people that you can trust to actually do what you want them to do without seeking their own personal advantage. So why would you not want to make use of someone that you absolutely know that you can trust, who you absolutely would not want to do anything for their own personal advantage? Like, Perrin is a useful tool, and it makes him, like, sickened and ashamed to think of a friend that way, but it doesn't change the fact that he needs to make use of him.
The world needs you to set aside your morality and use this tool. It's a really tough pill to swallow.
It is, and it's one of the reasons why Rand is not as good or as natural at leadership as Egwene is. I think the reason that people hate on Egwene is because she is able to be a much more cool-headed and practical leader and make use of her people and also not torture herself for the things that she needs to do. And that's just leadership.
Yeah.
And don't forget that some of that is, I believe, Rand's madness. That like self-torture, I do think is like, it's not just his sense of nobility, it's also this like, the list is madness.
And Egwene has healthy Aiel coping mechanisms instead of literal taint-induced insanity for compensating for that struggle.
Yes, the list is definitely madness, but he has always had negative self-talk from the very beginning, and he is prone to want to punish himself. That's just part of his nature.
All three of the boys do.
Oh, yeah. Matt, not as much, but still. And Perrin loves to punish himself.
Matt, like, makes a gesture at it. He's just better at getting over it than the other two.
Matt does not look to give horse in the mouth.
No.
Right? He is more than happy to take an advantage wherever he can.
Metal Datura says Matt sets his expectations for himself low, and that is 100% true. And frankly, not a bad thing. A lot of people act like having low expectations for yourself is a terrible thing, but I feel like having low expectations for yourself is perfectly acceptable as long as you're, meeting good requirements and doing good stuff for the things that really matter in your life. Who gives a shit if you only did a couple of chores on your weekend? If that was all you felt like doing, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and under-promise, over-deliver is a fine approach to life.
Yes, it is.
I'm a big fan of that. I love being surprised with how much more I got done in a day than I expected. That's a great place to be.
It is. The great thing about generally doing nothing is you can do very little and feel a tremendous sense of accomplishment. That's my life philosophy.
Absolutely. Next thing I've got is the whole Faile promising, I promise I will not spy on Rand. She said nothing about getting other people to spy on Rand or herself spying on people around Rand. Notice the wording of that promise. She herself will not personally spy on Rand specifically.
And Perrin makes a note that that's almost always true. Like, whenever he gets a promise out of her, she always leaves herself room to wiggle out. It's a very Aes Sedai thing to be doing.
And there's a thing that Davram says earlier about how women believe things but don't believe things. Where is that? It's she'll believe it, but a thing is not necessarily true just because a woman believes it is. Which, like, take out woman and replace person, and, like, what a comment on how unreliable our internal narrators are. Like, we are not talking about the same thing ever, right? We are all in our own little bubbles of truth, interpreting it as we want.
And one of my favorite ways that I prove that to myself is through the podcast and through editing, right? Like, when I swear to God I knew something or did something, or like, but then you can go back and hear yourself and make that mistake, and you're like, wow, my mind really just was wrong. Our brain is constantly interpreting things around us and making things up based on our expectations.
Or like,
that's why optical illusions work.
Just like your emotional state will influence like your perceptions. Like I'll do a recording, like a podcast recording, and I'll feel like I sounded ridiculously inarticulate, and then I'll go back and read it having perceived that it didn't come out very well at all, and listen to it and be like, no, that actually sounded really good. And that happens a lot, where you expect that it didn't come out well at all, and then you're really actually pleased with how it came out.
There's a great TED Talk that I saw when I was studying geography. I forget who it was by, but I think it was the author of a really good geology article. Anyway, it was about how feeling the sensation of being wrong is the same as the sensation of being right. And that's the struggle. Being wrong doesn't feel any different than being correct. And so we have to, really work hard to realize that we might be wrong even when we are dead certain we are correct. Like, the sensation is, we are very fallible, is the whole purpose of this TED Talk. We are just so fallible. Like you said, Seth, this is why
they had a porpoise on stage?
You know what? the brain mouth coordination is also very fallible. That is one of the worst things with podcasting is you realize how sloppy your speech is.
Oh God, it's
Oh,
so
what you're
bad.
talking about. Yeah. The way you slur words, the way you run things together, the way you start a sentence and then restart it and say in between in a way that's impossible to cut.
Oh, I fucking hate
The
that.
worst.
Oh. Yeah, and it's like you can't make your editing sound perfect and smooth because you're like, wow, or even if you repeat something 3 or 4 times because you want to get the perfect cut and then you can't because what you said before doesn't lead in perfectly. I fucking hate that.
Yeah. Everyone should start a
struggle is
podcast. It will make you hate yourself.
I was gonna say, we just got 3 podcast editors in a room together. I think I made a mistake. We're talking shop.
Totally. And our main audience member is Metal Datura, who also does a podcast and is just nodding along in the chat. Next thing I got is Fade to Black Sexy Times. And just the adorable
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm going for.
Of them coming together.
I just want to meet some of these Saldaean farm girls. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I think the joke that Jordan is making is that all women are horny.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's definitely a matter of women are not nearly as reserved as certain people may think they are. No, he says that if Saldaean farm girls were as eager as she is, there would be no crops harvested. That is eager.
She likes the beard.
But also, I love the fact that she asks him to unbutton her because, honestly, is there anything sexier than the whole undressing routine?
Well.
I also like that he's terrible at
Yeah,
it.
tears the buttons off every time. Blacksmithing fingers.
I have identified with that my whole life. Just that clumsy feeling of trying to do something delicate and being whoops, okay, let's pretend I didn't break that.
But honestly, how endearing is that? He's too strong for my buttons.
In fairness, she jerked. She moved, all right? It's not his fault. She was...
And she tears his shirt. So, their tailor is kept in work just fine.
I forget, isn't she terrible with needle and thread? Or does she... Or isn't she...
No, she's good. She mends one of his shirts in
She's good.
the Two Rivers.
Nynaeve's bad at it.
Nynaeve absolutely cannot sew to save her life.
And isn't Min really terrible, too?
Yeah.
Because she makes she tries to make the roses, and they look like birds.
And they look like birds. Yeah. Yes, very much so. But yeah.
And I use
Faile is
birds
plenty neat
loosely
at it.
in that.
Swallows?
Yellow
swallows? But yeah, there's this really sweet thing where he's undressing her and she's so politics, but also baby making. And he's whoa, whiplash, but also yes. And they've been together for months.
Yeah, they've been on the road for 2 months now. So that's why they're ooh, a bed.
And they were married for months before that. So they are practiced. And their passion has not faded yet.
They've only been together for 8 months.
Yeah, I mean, they're still in the shiny phase. Maybe not newly.
I'm just saying, within the scale of this series, this is a long period of time for a relationship to have developed. This is a very mature relationship.
They're one of the first relationships. I mean, she picks up their parents' trail very early on in the series.
No, in The Dragon Reborn.
But yeah, it's early, and it's one of the longest lasting relationships of the ones we see develop in the course of the series.
Right, because they meet Min earlier, but she's sort of boom, and gone. She pops in and then she's gone.
Yeah, Min doesn't join the party properly until Great Hunt, and that's the end. It's more in between Great Hunt and Dragon Reborn for her. And she's really not attached to Rand in that way until this book, and even then it's iffy. So yeah, it's just sweet that we actually get to see a relationship that has fully discharged its sexual tension of will they, won't they? And we're 4-8 months later, and they are still tearing each other's clothes off. And it's just nice that marriage is not a death blow to the relationships in this series.
Marriage will bring us together today. So we're here tomorrow, the next day, to finish up chapter 46. And by we, I mean me and Morgan. Aradia had plans, so she wasn't able to make it back, so you're just getting the two of us for the Rand Aes Sedai section. Alright, so we're starting with the Rand section, And this is Rand sort of chilling in the palace, and then Min walks in.
Yeah, was hanging out with Perrin.
We saw that in the previous chapter where Perrin and Rand basically sat down, and Rand tried to get Perrin to go to Tyr, and Perrin's like, no, I have to do all this stuff in the city. And so he's trying to think about, like, how am I going to manipulate him?
Yeah, he's having some really mercenary thoughts, and it's like he wants Perrin. He's hoping that he gets along well with Bashir, and then he's like, well, if he doesn't, then he might be... it says, if they struck sparks, maybe Perrin would be more amenable to Tyr. And then he feels bad about himself for having such mercenary thoughts about his friend, which, I get.
Which is kind of funny because in the last chapter, it was titled The Bitter Thought, where Perrin had a mercenary thought about Rand, thinking, oh, he has to stay sane till the last battle. So I think this is almost a reflection of the last chapter with Perrin, where now Rand is having the bitter thought.
Right. Yeah, they get at least the two of them are both often like, what a shitty way to think about a friend. Matt doesn't ever seem particularly troubled about that, but...
Well, there's a time when he's like, he wants Rand to be Rand, but he's also like, but he's the Dragon Reborn. And, it sucks. So I think he comes at it in a different way, but he's also, he sort of has the same thought pattern, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he's not nearly as deep a thinker as Rand and Perrin, so... He just doesn't trouble himself as much, but Min comes back because she and Faile left so Rand and Perrin could talk.
And then very quickly Faile ran off to go meet with her parents, with her mother. So that really seemed just to be an excuse to get away. Then, Faile was just there to check to make sure that Min wasn't after Perrin.
He asks if she liked her because he gets the impression that she didn't. And, he had made that... comment in his internal narrative in the last book that if he had to guess, neither of them would be one that the other would choose to spend time with.
That's right.
I would totally get.
I don't know. I think if they became friends, they could spend time together. But yeah, there's the bit of a coarseness to Faile that I think Min doesn't enjoy being around.
Yeah. Well, Min doesn't have a lot of patience for jealousy, which I really sympathize with. Min is a practical person, and she's also just sort of like, it's obvious that Perrin's really into you, and he married you, and also she knows Perrin,
right? So
she's just kind of like, you married him, so you should trust him, and yeah, she's impatient with that, which I really sympathize. I'm very impatient with jealousy.
Well, and look at their experiences, too. Min is the one who's, okay with sharing Rand with two other women, whereas Faile is not.
Would cut the throat, yeah. Well, and it's not like Min was real great about it from the beginning. She had to get used to the idea of being in an open relationship, but a lot of people have to do that. They're not super comfortable with the idea in the beginning, and they have to get their head around it because they feel, emotionally threatened by it, and the idea of having to share someone makes them feel like they're not going to be prioritized.
When the reality is letting someone have some freedom can actually give you a lot more in return.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of value to that. And Min's she really annoys me in this book in the sense that she's doing the whole, sitting on his lap and, doing her womanly wiles thing, trying to...
The teasing?
Yeah, but I can't help but sympathize with her at the same time because, right at the beginning when she comes to see him for the first time, he makes some comment about how he doesn't see her as a woman,
right.
Which she takes okay on the surface. His narrative is he knew right away it was a mistake, but you don't get from her point of view how she feels about it. But it had to have really hurt because all along... she's like, oh, I'm going to fall in love with this guy. And then she's thinking she has to compete. She doesn't know who the third woman is, but she's got to compete with Elaine, which is hard. Elaine's really pretty, and she's very traditionally feminine. A lot of people don't like how Min kind of changes her style of dress and grows her hair out and stuff, but...
Yeah, Elaine is the prototypical princess. You literally have to compete with the princess of the land for the man you love, and I think she's just oh, that's crazy.
And honestly, there's a lot of logic to what Min does. I mean, it sucks, but it makes sense because she's like, she wants Rand to like her, and she knows that he likes Elaine, so she's doing the minimum that she can bear to do to make herself more the type of woman that Elaine is, because she knows that that's what Rand likes, and she's like, if she has to love someone, she wants him to love her back. And so it's irritating, but I get why she's doing it.
Right. It's just a shame that like she doesn't isn't more confident in herself and trying to convince him to love her as she is, rather than being like, because I think he would, like, he totally already has a crush on her. He totally already concludes her with those two. He just, he's in that point where he won't admit it to himself, because if he admits that he likes her, all of a sudden she's a danger and she has to be sent away, and he can't do that again. He's already done it twice, and so he's lying to himself in order to prevent himself from like realizing how in love with Min he actually is.
100%. Yeah, he never once thinks that he wishes Min were any different from the way that she is.
Right.
So, and I feel like people who get irritated on how she changes don't seem to think about the fact that it's not like she does it because Rand asks that of her. I think she does it because she feels like she needs to be more feminine like Elaine, because she knows that that's what he likes, and that's realistic. I mean, that's something that someone would do if they felt like they were destined, because they had a vision that they had to love someone. You would want them to like you back, so you would want to be like you knew they liked someone. She knows he's making out with Elaine, she's gonna want to, use her feminine wiles as best she can.
He doesn't necessarily just have to like one type of person, and that's a little like undercutting him as and his preferences, and being like, oh well, just because he likes one kind of princess doesn't mean like he needs every girl he's with to be a princess.
That's absolutely true, but I think that it's honestly not uncommon for women to sell men short. I mean, RJ makes a theme of that, but it's yep. It's true. It's a true thing, and I think it's less true nowadays, at least talking to younger people, talking to, millennials and Gen Zers. They, partly because I think that gender has become much more blurred, there's much less expectations for masculinity or femininity, but, you and I grew up in the 90s, and it's just like there were much more cut and dried expectations that women had of men, and also what we just assumed. It makes sense.
I mean, the dumb Homer stereotype was pretty prevalent while I was growing up. I mean, that whole idea of the Homer Simpson, the Ralph Cramden, just name the Al Bundy. Like, name your dumb ass white dude married to some hot chick with a couple of kids, holding down a job that is way too good for him, and you sort of put yourself in the expectation of what men were just expected of in the 90s. What was expected of men, yeah.
Men were not allowed, to have boundaries in the same way. Like, she sits on his lap and kisses him and does all of this stuff with no care to whether or not he's comfortable with it, and just helps herself, because it's like, men are supposed to like sex. Yeah. Men are not supposed to want to say no, and so it's kind of like, if you want to...
I will push back on that a little bit, just because, like, they are clearly flirting. And, like, he's not admitting it to himself, but there's flirtation going on there. And he is flirting. I believe he is flirting back as much as he doesn't want to admit it.
Yeah, I suppose if he kind of, like, settles down when she sits on his lap, that's fair.
They constantly, like, nestling his arm into the little... The first time she sat down, he's, like, putting his arm on his hip and, like, pulling her in a little closer, and, like, he is not upset at all. And, there's more... Also, his reaction when he's like, oh, don't see you as that kind of girl, and then, like, his backtracking is very much like... Not necessarily a trope, but a little bit of that romantic trope, when they're like, oh, I don't see you that way. I mean, not but unless you see me that way. Wait, do you see me that? Like, that stumbling, God, yeah. Like, it's not that I see you as a friend, it's just that I don't want to ruin our friendship by telling you how hot I think you are. That's sort of the impression I got from him, and as much as that did piss her off, she also understood the context of it a little bit.
Okay, I could see that.
And I'm reading into it a little bit, but that's sort of my interpretation, is like, these two people have the hots for each other. They're teenagers who are flirting, and as much as that's from their POV, not necessarily obvious, it's kind of obvious to me.
Okay, yeah, and you're getting his internal narrative of him telling himself what he's supposed to want, what he's supposed to do. You know, he's trying to remind himself, she's just teasing, she's punishing me for what I said, and, you know, I think that there's a fair point to what you say.
But all that self-talk is to be like, don't give in. You can admit that you like her. Don't admit that you like her. You really like this girl, but don't say it, because then
he's like,
don't
get a boner.
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
Get a boner. Don't get a boner.
Margaret Thatcher naked on a cold night.
It's like, why do I have to have tight pants?
Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. Why does she have to have tight pants? Again, it's unreliable narrator where flirting in real life is a very non-verbal thing, and we're seeing this from a very verbal standpoint and conversational standpoint, you know?
That's fair.
So that's, you know, and part of the problem I think with Berlaine and Perrin is Perrin's behavior around her is like classic flirting, hard to get flirting, and she's like, why are you flirting and then not following up? I don't get this. You know, she is confused as hell because his hard to getness is, you know, as far as she's concerned, flirting.
I don't know. I feel like he's pretty emphatic in telling her to fuck off, but I don't know. He's in the same kind of trap of like not wanting to make it awkward, not wanting to, you know, make a fuss, which is a, you know, trap that a lot of women fall into.
Absolutely.
A lot of women who are in situations where they maybe engage in sexual activity that they don't really want to, but it's like, you know, they don't want to make it weird, they don't want to make it awkward, so, but that's just a whole other thing. Yeah,
right,
speaking
yeah.
of...
the Perrin Barrelon thing. But, because I brought that up because of this prophecy here, right?
About the hawk and the thing, yeah, and she's pitying Perrin because she knows that Faile is gonna make his life a hell, basically, because she's so jealous, and that when the hawk comes along, Perrin's basically gonna pay the price, and it's not even his fault.
Right. Yeah, she's interpreting all of that based on her prophecy and her understanding of Faile's personality.
And I feel bad for Perrin as well. I feel like so many things would be better for the people in their relationships if they would not wait to get married to have sex and would just be sluttier and a little more casual about it. Their lives would be easier.
Perrin and Barrelon, and Faile are a good team together. If the three of them just, stopped fighting and started fucking, everything would have gone so much smoother.
Just bang it out.
Right? Just, guys, come on, that's sort of what I imagine the night when Faile and Berlaine are alone in the tent and sort of work things out and make the plan to pretend to be friends. But they're like, come on, let's just go ahead and bang it out and figure it out.
This is what she means about Berlaine's political savvy.
I mean, this is what I said. You should always... We've got the three boys. Rand is with 3 girls. Perrin should be with 2, and Matt with 1.
I feel like Matt is the one most destined to divorce, so...
Yeah, you don't think there's any way they're going to stay together long term?
I don't think so. I don't think that there's anything viable about their relationship, but I can't stand to him, so I guess that's, part of that. Yeah, but I just, don't see them ever being right for each other or, workable.
Oh, you're missing the challenge.
Relationships aren't supposed to be a challenge, but I guess nobody has a healthy relationship in the Wheel of Time, or almost nobody, so...
Well, I guess that depends on what you call a healthy relationship.
I guess so. I'm very much low conflict, so to me that's a healthy relationship, is, not feeling emotionally agitated with your partner.
I feel like there's a certain level of, just danger they're all in, where it's like, okay, a certain amount of emotional agitation is going to be happening, because, apocalypse. So maybe it's more important that certain other things, like the ability to chop off a Trollocs head, is maintained.
That's fair. So she sees with Perrin and Rand together that he's able to hold his own. She's got that constant vision of the darkness and the fireflies going into it, and when Rand's by himself, it's being swallowed up. The fireflies are not beating the darkness, and when he has Perrin, they can hold their own.
And with
Matt, that they can defeat it.
Yep.
And then also has the vision that twice he's going to have to be there, or it will be very bad. presumably once that's Dumai's Wells, and I'm guessing the second time is at the last battle.
I was thinking Dragon Mount, Veins of Gold, because he's there in, not necessarily during the last battle, because, I mean, obviously it's important that he's there for the last battle, but I'm thinking before the last battle, if he's not there, then Luke and Slayer either take Rand down, or, like, I think what happens is, the bad thing is that Rand turns to the dark side. And the two opportunities when that could have happened is if he didn't get rescued in Dumai's Wells, or if something bad happened on the mountaintop.
Okay.
And either way, we would have seen, like, Super Darth, like, evil Rand come out of those. So I think that's, like, Perrin prevented that twice.
Okay, I was just thinking it more from, like, he had to take care of Lanfear in order to prevent her getting to Rand. He basically, like, patrolled Teleron Riyadh the whole time to protect Rand, which I loved. I thought that was a great job for Perrin.
That was. Especially with Gaul and the wolves.
Oh yeah, I thought that was such a wonderful, like, I feel like Sanderson did a great job with him.
Sanderson has stated that Perrin was his favorite, and I get that. Like, Perrin very much, to me, and I feel like he wrote him very, very well. Although the teleporting anime I'm behind you now, kid battle was a little ridiculous in my opinion. I wish there was a little more of a cooldown between teleporting. I don't know. It just that one was, I was like, oh well, that's okay. I'm glad you did that, Jordan. Sanderson, you've watched a lot of anime.
Yeah.
He occasionally his battle scenes, like, I can picture them in anime so well. It's clear that, like, he sort of the two styles have certainly influenced each other, the writing and then the...
Also never watched any anime.
Yeah, so...
Well, then you're the wrong person to have that conversation with.
You're like, this book series I never read is like this visual style I've never seen. You're like, yes, interesting.
I mean, I think I've watched, like, one anime or something, but it was, like, my friend... I had a bunch of mushrooms first, and then my friend showed it to me, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And it was a long time ago. I think I was, like, 19.
It's the appropriate response to anime.
Yeah. He's concerned that she'll get caught by the Aes Sedai for coming over, and she's like, shut the fuck up, you don't know what you're talking about, and basically she let him know that just like the embassy in Cairhien, the Saladar Aes Sedai are meeting with the nobles to basically talk about what will happen once Rand is out of Caemlyn.
Yeah.
And
I think the difference in Caemlyn is he is planning on leaving. And they're talking about, like, what happens when Elaine is queen, as opposed to, like, in Cairhien, they're talking about what happens when I guess they're saying when he accompanies us back to the White Tower, but basically what they mean is when they kidnap him and dethrone him. Mm-hmm. But to him, it looks exactly the same.
Well, yeah, it does, and it's just sort of like, for the Saladar Aes Sedai, it's like, we actually have, you know, your heir to the throne, and I don't think the Saladar Aes Sedai are getting how politically weak Elaine's position is at that point, because Morgase's former allies really don't give a shit, and I forget which one meets Elorian in her bath, but, you know, Elorian is just kind of like, yeah, but what about the throne, and doesn't get a straight answer. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and then...
I think she gets a wheel weaves. Yeah.
And then Dylan is kind of like, okay, but, you know, we need the daughter heir, and they never admit to knowing where she is, but in both cases, they're just kind of like, we're going to get the Dragon Reborn out of this city, so we're meeting with the nobles to deal with making sure that there's no, you know, vacuum of power, no lack of stability, and then these Aes Sedai, they know that they have Elaine, like, they left Saladar after Elaine came, but they don't know that Elaine is going to be running off to Iwudar and doing her thing there, so they're really behind the game as far as how everything, you know, takes off, but...
Right, because they don't have access to the World of Dreams or traveling yet, so they're just, the last they know, was when they left Saladar. It's the last communication they've had. Although, I don't know, I would assume there's pigeons?
Yeah?
Can you get messages from Saladar or receive messages from Saladar? Because, like, it's not like it's been established for a while.
Saladar does have pigeon coats. They talk about that later on, that people will travel to the pigeon coats in Saladar while the army is on the move.
That's right. So they do maintain them there. Okay, so yeah, that makes sense. So maybe there is, like, better communication than I expected between the embassy and Saldaea itself.
Oh, I was gonna say, so she kisses him again, and he's thinking this is getting out of hand because she's being less and less subtle about it every day. It's
Right.
like she's, like taming a horse or something. Perrin talks about that when Barrelane keeps, like, lightly touching him, like how you break a horse.
I mean, Min was a horse, a stable girl,
That's
So
true.
I would assume that's pretty much exactly what she's doing.
That's true. Just getting him used to it, which is...
Yep.
We have evolved to such a, like, consent-based culture where we're very much like, you need to ask someone's permission before you touch them and everything, and it's kind of like, so my experience growing up has not been the same as, the average woman, and so I've just kind of been listening to a lot of the Me Too movement and listening to what actually people feel comfortable with, and so that has had me reading this from a different perspective and realizing that, people aren't comfortable a lot of times when you touch them without asking. They just don't say anything.
Right.
And so...
And I think it depends on who's touching you, too, and what the circumstances are.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, when you're in a relationship, there's implied consent. Like my wife's family, it's like I don't come over and meet you for the first time and then you hug me because you're a hugger. It's just like, no, fuck off, It's like, my wife doesn't like you. You don't get to hug me, But then it's like, you don't want to make things awkward, and it's just like that whole uncomfortable thing. I've just become so much more aware of that as the conversation has come about, and then that makes reading all of this stuff much more uncomfortable, but it's like I had no idea, it's only been part of, like, the dialogue very recently, and so...
I'm a handshaker. That's something I've noticed. Like, even in the most, like, inappropriate situations, if I meet somebody, I'll reach out to shake their hand. It's like, my dad ingrained that into me in such a way that, like, people look at me and be like, okay, you're the fucking preppiest dude I know when you first meet me, because, like, he's like, hi, nice to meet you, and I, like, stick out my hand out, and they're like, dude, this is not, they're like, I got my fucking hands elbow deep in a cow right now. What are you doing? Like, I'm like, sorry. I can see where some people, like, if they're ingrained, like, I give people a hug when I greet them, that they don't even think about it. And so there's these two sides of, like, people who are like, well, I don't really consent to be touched, and other people are like, well, I'm just saying, like, what do you mean consent to be touched? It's, and so we've had to adjust a lot of our cultural norms, and especially in the South, where, like, that, like, man, old Southern women just hug you to say hi, like, that's
right.
Just like, and it's something that I was never very comfortable with, but I never, of course I can't say anything. Are you kidding me? No.
You don't want to make it awkward. You don't want to make it weird.
And you'll just offend them, because, like, but, I always felt like, I'm the weird one. I'm the culturally, like, I'm the guy who can't, like, who doesn't fit in, because I don't like hugs from strangers.
Well, I've learned to be much more respectful or aware of people's boundaries, and, like, I was never really bad about, like, hugging strangers, but, yeah, I used to not be so great about boundaries, because it's just sort of like you assume that because you're a friendly, nice person and you mean no harm, that everybody else knows that about you, because obviously they do, and it's just, I've become much more aware of how I impact the people around me.
Well, and one of the things I've, like, as a male, I've always, and whenever I was brought up, like, touch was always a no-no for dudes, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that has been part of, I don't know, it's one of those things where I feel like I was very, it's a risky thing.
For guys to touch each other?
For guys to touch anybody.
Okay.
Right? For different reasons, but for guys to touch each other, yes, that's risky, right? There's the no homo, like, God forbid someone thinks you're, like, caressing them, if you don't slap them hard on the ass twice as they walk by, which, by the way, is also really homoerotic, but whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, that, or, like, God forbid you touch a woman in a casual way, and A, she either thinks you're flirting when you're really not trying to, or B, like, it's just this awkward, like, am I gonna get in trouble because I casually hugged somebody and I thought it was okay, or is this gonna make our friendship weird? Like, I don't know, it's just, I think a lot of adult men in our society don't get touched enough, because the idea of man touch is always going to be sexual.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate, because, people do need physical affection. It's good for your health, and it's good for, psychologically.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually have like personal ads for cuddle buddies where it's like they don't even want a sexual relationship. It's just like, let's cuddle and watch movies, and which is cool. That makes sense, I think, is that for people who are kind of like, I don't want to take the time to try to find, a sex partner, or it's exhausting. I just want someone who wants to cuddle and watch a movie. And
You're selling me.
it's true. They do. So you can find that now.
I like that as she's leaving, he checks out her butt and she turns around and catches him. Like, this is what I'm talking about. There's flirting going on, right? Like,
yeah.
you're blushing because you were, and she's like swaying her ass at him, and he's like, yeah, I was looking.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Loose Theron has to, like, totally ruin the mood by mumbling about the Aes Sedai and being like, if they're plotting with nobles, I have to do something about them, and Rand's just like, fuck off, and...
Right.
But he's actually trying to give him useful information, and it almost feels like this is the start of Lews Therin actually being useful rather than just distressing, and telling him, 9 are too dangerous for you, this isn't cool.
It's a little bit of Rand's fear, like his fear coming out, I think, is why he's afraid of these Aes Sedai, and so this voice in his head is suddenly sort of manifesting his fear.
Yeah, it's kind of like you get racing thoughts when you are anxious, but because Rand's crazy, his anxiety has this, panting, crazy dude whispering at him that it's too dangerous, you can't allow it, and, it's like, you get this vision of this guy, like, rocking back and forth in Rand's head. It's
Right.
Like, poor fucking guy. Yeah.
I do believe it's just a manifestation of Rand's own anxiety. It's not him, communicating or someone trying to, like, give him useful information. It's just, like, when your own subconscious is like, bad idea, don't go in there, like, except it's a person, because he's insane.
For sure. So he just fills his goblet and tries not to listen.
And also notice how Lews Therin is getting more persistent the more power he uses. And now that he's holding it constantly in the void, like, Lews Therin is getting more persistent because you're getting more crazy.
Poor Rand.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, it's like he fills his goblet again. Like, it almost sounds like he's trying to drink to drown it out, but it's like Rand never seems to turn to alcohol.
No, he also often sits there with, like, a full goblet and, like, doesn't finish it. It's like the idea of turning alcohol seems like a good idea, but he's too busy.
Yeah, too busy to, like, get shit-faced and drown it out, which, is honestly kind of impressive. Maybe he's too young to become a hard drinker yet, but it's like, you get so many people who have problems in the story who become hard drinkers, but he never does, and
yeah,
that's
Dane
Bornhall, Jacob Carradine. It's just the White Cloaks. The White Cloaks are drinkers, and the Coplans apparently. But yeah, it's such a, like, the weight of being the dragon and going crazy. It would be logical, especially with his issues of sleeping, that he would drink until he passed out just to get some quiet, but he doesn't, and that's good, I guess, and also interesting. But
yeah, I imagine he just sits there in the silence, listening, trying not to listen to the madman in his thoughts.
That's terrible. It's like, because, like, being anxious and having racing thoughts is bad enough, but to have it manifest as a voice, and I'm sure for people who have schizophrenia, I mean, like, I've read threads about stuff like that where people will talk about how their voices manifest, and it all sounds real fucking awful. I always feel sorry for him. Like, he becomes a douche, but you can't even really blame him because, it's not like he has a fun job. He barely has any joy in his life, and yeah, having voices in his head or something he has to struggle against, it's just like, yeah, he gets all kinds of shit piled on him, and it's really sad. And every time you go back to the beginning and you start over, he is so sweet and so pure and just such a decent human that it's like heartbreaking all over again. It's like every time I'm just like, oh, this poor fucker, he's such a nice kid and such a nice person, and it's sad. Poor Rand.
Do you want to switch over to
Demira?
Demira, yeah.
Yeah.
From her POV, because this is kind of a cool little scene.
I love it.
Yeah, because this is one where it takes a little bit of detective work to figure out exactly what's going on. And there's a few things we can debate over. We've got Demira, who's a brown and a little distractible, who gets stabbed by Aiel, right?
Yeah, she's taking the back alley back to the Crown of Roses. She goes to the gate to the inner city. She's waiting for her agent, who's the second librarian, who's actually the spy that Rena Harfer uncovers when they're looking for spies, which I always found interesting. The second librarian.
That's right, yes. Yeah, because he's an agent for Brown, which makes sense, because she's a Brown sister.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and he also ends up sending messages back to the White Tower, to the Brown Aja in the White Tower.
Yes, that I can't say for sure, but...
There's a line where it says, when he left the coterie, a pigeon flew to the White Tower as well. So, if he's an agent of Demira, who's a rebel Aes Sedai, and he's sending letters to the White Tower, he's playing both ends.
Okay,
or maybe he just doesn't know any better, right? Maybe he's like, oh, I'm an agent for the Tower. I'm just going to continue to send my pigeons to the White Tower and the Brown Aja.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So, you see from her POV that she has made a habit of going through the back alleys to get around and basically just using her warder as a beacon, presumably.
Oh, is that... Okay, I was going to say... I've heard some debate that, like, perhaps she was compelled to go down the back alleys, but it's just her usual route.
Yeah, because it says something about how the narrow alleyways of Camelin had been muddy the last time she was in them, but even dry, the deeper she went, the more unfortunate the smell. So, yeah, it seems that it's just a habit for whatever reason.
She just is so distractible, she just doesn't care, like... if she's walking on the nice streets, just as long as she's, like, heading towards her destination.
Yeah, probably just that it's the fastest way, and she wants to get back, because, she didn't get what she wanted from her agent, and so she's gonna have to wait until she can go on her turn to the palace to ask Rand for permission to go and check the library for what she wants to look for, which really irritates her, but...
Typical Brown. Yeah, she's just, like, the most typical Brown there possibly could be.
Yeah.
Like, she exudes Brown stereotype.
Yeah, for sure. I really, really like her. I love her practicality. She's a beautiful example of just one of the minor POVs that he writes where, you don't ever really get anything from her again, but she is just a real person in this just small bit of text that we get from her.
Mm-hmm.
She knows that she was followed from the Crown and Lion, or the Crown of Roses.
Do you think... Sorry, just a quick question.
Yeah.
We noticed that Milam didn't show up for her meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he was delayed?
I don't think so.
So why didn't he show up for the meeting? Was he just late?
That I don't know.
Because we see him later, and he doesn't reflect on, like, being accosted or anything like that.
Where do we see him?
Crossroads of Twilight, chapter 13, where he gets identified, and chapter 14, basically... Okay. When Rena identifies him as a spy?
Yeah, he's never actually, like, we don't get a point of view for him or anything. We just know that he's an agent. Yeah, so it's never explained why he doesn't show up.
I kind of assume he's been delayed, but, deliberately, but that could just be a coincidence.
It just says plainly he had not received her message. If he had, he would have made whatever excuse was necessary to be there at the appointed time.
So I'm guessing the message was intercepted, and that's how they knew to ambush her there at that time, and he never received it. That's why he didn't show up.
Okay.
But, like, yeah, she was set up. She was definitely set up. How did they know to be there? They got the message. Why didn't he show up? He didn't get the message.
All right.
I like that.
I like that, too.
And by the way, who do you think they are?
They as in who set her up?
Who stabs her?
Okay, well, so, because... my original guess was that it was White Cloaks who were dressed up as Aiel because we had a problem with that earlier.
And those were Fane's White Cloaks.
Yes. When I was doing the podcast-a-thon, I was doing small minor Aes Sedai POVs, and kind of discussing those. And so I just broke down these little POVs, and that was when I noticed that Verin was the one who guided Demira to suggest that they all go confront Rand after this happened. And so I wondered if Verin was the one who got the guys to dress up as Aiel and stab Demira. And that would make sense if she were the one who intercepted the letter somehow, or if she had messaged the librarian and told him not to come for whatever reason.
So your theory is Verin hired Dark Friends, or got Dark Friends to do this? Is that...
That was my theory. The Wheel of Time companion told me something else, which, but I don't like that theory as well, because I don't like what the Wheel of Time companion told me, because the thing with the guy not showing up and the fact that he must not have got her letter, and I know that Verin had access to the agent because Alana was talking about an agent, and so it's like Verin somehow was, in contact with an agent, and that makes me wonder if Verin had messaged him and said for whatever reason, don't meet with any other Aes Sedai, it's a trap, or who knows what she would have told him. And so it's like most things in the Wheel of Time companion seem like they're pretty canon, but some things seem like they're almost filled in based on assumption. And I like the idea that Verin's behind it because it seems to make sense with all of the little clues that are going on.
So I think they're Ashaman.
Okay.
We just saw Taim show up and confront Rand, and he's like, do you want me to do something about these Aes Sedai? Do you want me to drive them away? And Rand's like, no, don't do that. Don't come near them. But for one thing, first of all, let's just say right off the bat, these are definitely not Aiel. Right? They have dark eyes. They're not wearing veils when they kill. They're short. These are not native Aiel. These aren't Shido. These aren't...
And they specifically say, tell the other witches to stay away from the Dragon Reborn. And the Dragon Reborn is not an Aiel prophecy.
No, it's not. So there's all sorts of clues that these aren't Aiel, despite dressing like that. And it's just that she missed all the clues because she's supposedly brown in her own head. So that leaves a bunch of men who are contemptuous of Aes Sedai. And that White Cloaks are an option, but again, I don't see actual White Cloaks being available, and Fain doesn't seem to have the right motivation. Maybe he does want the Aes Sedai to stay away from his guy, but do we even know where Fain is right now?
The last we knew, he was outside the city, and he was upset when someone tried to kill Rand and shot the crossbow bolt, and that was the last that we knew. And it's like, the next time we see him is in the next book when he's, at the party with Torum Rioton, where they get the massive bubble of evil and he stabs Rand.
But that's outside this city?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's where Fain is also Fain and his White Cloaks, because he does call them witches, which is a very White Cloak terminology.
Yes.
Ooh. So Fain's White Cloaks are looking pretty good to me, too.
Yeah, and it does say White Cloaks in the Wheel of Time companion.
It does? Okay. Then Fain's White Cloaks do seem to be the standout for me.
Yeah.
Not necessarily White Cloaks, because I don't think they'd know how to do this.
I just love the idea of it being Verin, because she's so devious in so many other ways through this bit, and it's just kind of like trying to figure out what her game is and why she makes this play, not only to take over the embassy, but also to push the confrontation and encourage the confrontation. I mean, she could have been told, encourage a confrontation, and that was just under orders, but actually creating a situation to encourage the confrontation. I like the idea of her doing that and being that devious and setting it up, but maybe she's just capitalizing on a situation.
So, because I want the squat man with villainous eyes to be one of the Ashaman.
Mm-hmm.
I want that to be an identifiable Ashaman. Because we don't have that big of a list of Ashaman yet. I don't even know if we have any Darkfriend Ashaman yet.
I think Rand has met Torval. You've done the chapter where he's gone to the farm.
No, I can't find any Dreadlords that would match that description. or any of the descriptions. So I'm going to go with the fact... I'm going to have to go back. The witches really fucking won me over for Fane's white cloaks.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if that's what's in the companion, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then how did he interrupt the message? That's what makes me wonder.
Yeah, I have no idea. Maybe it's a coincidence?
But yeah, I guess it just seems that Fane wants the witches to stay, the quote-unquote witches to stay away from Rand.
Or he just doesn't want any cooperation and is engaging in acts of fuckery to make life difficult for Rand. Because,
right.
Why wouldn't you?
Especially since we just had Taim walk in and be like, I can warn them off.
Mm-hmm.
It just made more sense to me that these would be Ashaman, and they'd be able to teleport to Gateway in, although probably not, because Rand would have sensed it, but...
Yeah, between that or just the fact that the librarian didn't get the message, it's just either of those is a more fun explanation than the White Cloaks.
Oh, well.
Damn it!
And I think Verin is just taking advantage of the situation.
Yes. Maybe she just has a standing order to fuck it up however she can.
Or maybe she's just trying to take control of the embassy and just saw an opportunity to tell the leader to go, pound sand.
Maybe. I mean, in fairness, it's Marana's fault, but that's all wrapped up in the character of Marana and the fact that she is not a natural leader and is generally kind of a passive person. And
right.
So her instinct was to defer to Verin, and she couldn't overcome it. And so when Verin decided to start taking over, Marana did not assert herself and be like, hey, yo, that was kind of that.
I just wanted to mention that we skipped over one little bit, that we get a second mention of the cats like Aes Sedai and dogs don't.
Uh-huh.
Which is something we got really early on, and we're like, do we ever hear about that again? And this is... like a callback to super early on in the podcast when we were trying to find this, and this was that quote was here.
Yeah, we get that here.
Cat seemed to send something about Aes Sedai. She'd never heard of an Aes Sedai being scratched by even the most feral cat. Dogs were hostile, true, almost as if they thought Aes Sedai were cats, but they almost always slinked away after a little show.
Yeah, there's a scene, I think it's the prologue of Winter's Heart, where Tovann Ghazal is wandering around inside the village in the Black Tower, and she gets basically attacked by dogs, and the wives have to come and rescue her because
right.
she's not allowed to channel without permission. So I always thought that was kind of weird, just like, dogs are for boys and cats are for girls or whatever.
Right, yeah. There does seem to be something a little weird about that. It's it maintains through the whole series, but it's always like, okay, I guess. Yeah. I mean, we do get from Perrin that wolves can always tell an Aes Sedai at a distance, right? Like, wolves and animals seem to be able to sense what's different about them.
Yeah, I think that, animals have special senses anyway, so it's kind of like, but I don't know, I found it really odd that it was like these common house pets, one of them will like one. I mean, maybe it's a callback to the fact that it seems relatively common that a lot of kids, when they're small, think that all dogs are boys and all cats are girls. Like, that's not an uncommon thing that kids will think. I don't know why.
To be honest, I think it's Jordan trying to incorporate myths of our time into the Wheel of Time, and the idea that witches have familiars that are black cats is something that I think that's how he incorporated that legend into the Wheel of Time. Witches have cats. Well, maybe there's something about the one power that makes cats more attracted to Aes Sedai.
That is actually a much more logical and reasonable reason that would be a thing.
But yeah, just the black cats and the familiars trope that I think, because a lot of what I like to do is think like, okay, how is Jordan looking at our myths and our legends, and how is he trying to incorporate them into his story? Mm-hmm. Because that's his idea is this story is the source of all of our myths and legends.
Yeah.
Or at least a good chunk of them.
Yeah, that's always, like, really fun, and I love it when I find, like, whatever kind of trope, and just imagine the brilliance in how, like, meta it is to write a story where if anyone wanted to come to you and accuse you of ripping off from Tolkien or whatever, you can just sort of be like, well, you already set up this brilliant thing where you can be like, well, yes, of course, you know, it's all designed to come back around. And yeah, I think that that's so incredibly brilliant, because it's
almost as brilliant as Verin.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a great way to write plot armor into the storyline and make it canon.
Yeah, apparently someone once asked him if Verin was old tongue for Deus Ex Machina, and he said no, but basically it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Verin is brilliant because, yeah, it lets you accept any manner of, like, highly unlikely bullshit that you would totally dismiss as, like, garbage, lazy writing in anyone else. And here it's like, it totally makes sense and you'll believe anything, and it's just sort of like because of this one particular plot device. So yeah, I think Verin is brilliant.
And to be honest, I think that's one of the reasons why some of the women's storyline gets more hate, is the weird coincidences that make them work. We are like, what? That doesn't make sense. Whereas in the men's storyline, we're like, Verin! You know, like, and it gives you a little more forgiveness for the male storylines because they're Verin.
That makes sense. And yeah, a lot of times I'm like, well, you know, the women should be Verin too. And I get it. Like, if I were writing it, I would feel like it would be very much stretching it to be like, okay, well, we'll have, you know, these girls be Verin too. And I always found it weird that, like, Swan had the capacity to see Verin, like, when she told Moraine at the beginning of the Great Hunt that it was one of her talents. Like, how would she know? Like, you would think that she had only discovered it that very moment when she had seen Rand, because what other Verin in her life had she seen? Did they have, like, Verin for a weekend where, you know, somebody...
I mean, they talk about that there are these, like, quick Verin, like, Verin of a day, like, someone who, like, leads a battle and makes a change, and, like, you never know how long it's gonna last or how strongly it's gonna be, you know?
You
like,
beat Verin for a day.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the idea that maybe someone was Verin briefly, and maybe weekly, right? That she saw a glow around somebody, and they're like, "Oh, wow, he changed events on today's battlefield." You know, maybe she saw something like that. And especially as the Amyrlin, I'm sure she's seen a lot of very important people brought in front of her, so it would make sense that maybe one of them, you know, was Verin for a while and was brought in front of the Amyrlin seat, and that was how he was sort of like changing history for that. And she saw a glow around him. Maybe. That's the only thing, you know. It's all speculative. We don't have any canon for that, but I can come up with a story.
Yeah, for sure. Like, welcome to my Verin talk. Right? Give a riveting speech to tell you the things that I've done to change my life, and people go from there. Yeah, that's what I assumed, was that it would have to be somebody who does something that changes the course or causes, you know, people to feel inspired, but it's not massive, and so she might have seen something in the course of her duties, but that it wouldn't be, you know, like maybe a leader or someone would be Verin for a short period of time while affecting an important treaty or something, but I don't know.
Or I can see the prototypical, like, the way Perrin stepped up and became a lord, you know, like, that's happened before, and I can see where maybe another Verin on another battlefield became a lord, you know, and, like, would then go from a commoner to being raised up.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I've just always wondered about that, because I've just kind of like, how would you know that, unless it was just sort of like, well, that must be one of my talents, because holy shit.
Right, you're glowing like a, I don't know. We don't have a long list of Verin, we only have a list of the strongest Verin. Rand, Lewis Theron, and Arthur Hawkwing. But they're like the three strongest Verin ever. Yeah. And of course, the other two boys. But, you know, there must be others.
One woman who founds the 10 nations, Mabrium and Sharid or something. She's like an Aes Sedai, and she helps found the 10 nations.
Schooling me on that history.
Very small numbers of people who do massive, world-changing things.
It almost seems like there's more people who can see Verin than Verin themselves.
Even though Swan says that it's a rare talent and even rarer than Verin. Though I suppose that would be true if... Well, we have 3 people that we know of who could see Verin in Swan, Nicola, and Logain, and we have 3 Verin in the story, so... Yeah, I don't fucking know. I found it interesting because I've sort of like... I feel like that's something that would have been better writing to be like, I guess that's one of my talents, and I learned that today, because, like, what kind of Verin would you have seen before that day?
Right.
But I don't judge too hard, because it's like when you put out a series, you know, your books are already published, and when you think of something like, oh shit, you can't go back and fix it, and what are you gonna do?
So, the only last question I had is, what did they think they were going to accomplish by not saying anything to Rand? Like, it ended up being just the worst decision, because Rand's like, oh, I don't actually know what's going on. You're just literally not showing up for no reason, as far as I can tell.
One of the things that I think is really dumb is that it's like, I feel like Verin knows Rand well enough that she has to know that he wasn't behind this.
I'm nodding.
So it's kind of like, for her to be, she says, since you were the target, Demira, you should help decide how Master Althor is to be taught his lesson. And you seem to have made a beginning already, because she starts at the beginning of at that paragraph that I was reading, saying that he has to be taught to respect Aes Sedai, which, yeah, she had an encounter with him where he was utterly disrespectful. But, yeah, she cannot believe that he was actually responsible for that, even if she knows that he's dangerous, she knows that he's not necessarily totally sane. She also spent enough time in his company and had enough of an estimation of his general moral fiber that she has to know that...
Yeah, but I was going to say, is it really punishing him to keep all the Aes Sedai away from him for a while? Isn't that just, like, exactly what he wants?
Yeah, so
But it also delays talks.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that she knows perfectly well that he isn't responsible, but she's kind of guiding this suggestion. And so she's like, you know, Demira has the right to first suggestions, and so Demira says she wants him to worry, so nobody goes to the palace today, and they're just thinking, well, there's no point in even mentioning it to him because he'll deny it.
Right.
And, like, the one Shiner in Aes Sedai wants to just find the Aiel who did it and punish them. And Demira's like, no, I don't want to ruin the chance I have to study Aiel by doing that. That's a terrible idea. So
rather than getting proof of anything, they make assumptions and then act on those assumptions and completely fail to accomplish their goals.
Yes.
Great Aes Sedai work.
And I feel like the only ones whose goals got accomplished were Verin. And Morana says in... don't know which chapter it is, but it's like after they do the Mirror of Mists, and she gets the letter from Rand that says, I'm going to Cairhien and you can follow with no more than 6, basically, that Verin guiding Demira to suggest the confrontation was done so skillfully that only a Grey could have even noticed it. So, yeah, I feel like, I don't know if Verin just had orders from the Black Aja saying, do whatever you can to screw this up. Mm-hmm. And so she capitalized on this moment, which is maybe just the simplest solution and makes sense. Or if she had some other reason for wanting to do it.
And again, I think all of her plans probably got thrown out the window when he gets kidnapped. And that's not something that I think Verin knew about ahead of time.
Oh no, because when Perrin is going after Rand and Verin and all of the Aes Sedai who follow, the 9 Aes Sedai, have met up with the 2 Rivers men, and they all join up with Perrin, he specifically says in his internal narrative that Verin smelled furious. So she's real upset. So I don't know what her point was to have that happen, but I don't think she intended for that to happen.
Yeah, so that whatever that was, it probably ruined whatever her plans were for him. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And also, she's like, how dare you kidnap him without me knowing about it?
Yeah.
In this situation, Verin doesn't know.
No, I feel like Verin is in a situation, and it's kind of like how she explains it to Egwene, where it's like, you know, I have to engage in enough acts of fuckery that it looks like I'm doing my job of being evil, while at the same time trying to not engage in acts of fuckery that will fuck things up so badly that they cause, you know, massive amounts of harm, and it's a delicate balancing act, which I guess is just the life of a double agent.
Right, I was gonna say, that's being undercover, is just like, you know, sometimes you gotta do terrible things to maintain your cover, but, like, you want to, like, maintain your cover without, like, causing too much damage. But, you know, like, if you work for an organization that causes damage, sometimes you gotta pay the piper.
Yeah, it's all a matter of balancing harm, but it makes her character so compelling, and you've got to imagine that no matter how much she is indeed on the side of the light, even when she is doing bad things. Her sense of empathy is, I think, detached enough that she feels things like regret. Like, I feel like Verin is almost still a borderline sociopath, even if she's not evil.
I think she's more had to have her sense of what's right and wrong adjusted a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Just to cope?
Yeah.
That makes sense. But yeah, I never realized until I went back and went through all of those minor POVs that Verin was behind stoking the confrontation, and it just kind of changed everything and made it so much more interesting, and just kind of like, oh, what's going on and what's her real game here?
I can't believe that this curbside delivery thing like existed, or parking lot delivery thing existed before the pandemic for like $5, and we just didn't realize it was a thing. We would have been doing this years ago.
Yeah,
Oh
it's
my
the best
God.
thing ever.
Well, I don't have a car, so that it's like not a thing really. 'Cause, like, I mean, I guess I could walk up and have them just drop. Like,
Do you have a bike?
yeah,
You have a
Yeah.
cargo bike.
yeah.
A Portland
I
doesn't
don't
have
even
to have
need
a cargo bike.
Like, between bags on the back and a backpack, and I can hang bags off the handlebars if I'm.
Yeah, so you
like,
could totally.
I've
get them to pull
transported.
it out.
Transported.
You could.
Oh, totally.
do
Yeah.
that. Because then you don't have to go in the store, and then it's all COVID safe.
And Metal Detour is right. It prevents impulse buying. It reduced our grocery bill so much. So it's been really great.
But then it also means that when you remember something that you forgot to put on the list,
Yep.
you can't get it. So that,
Yep.
you know.
And they suck at substitutions.
Unless you tell them what the substitutions you need are, and they have something that's good enough, and like we moved such that we can't get the same brand of milk that we were getting, and it's like trying to find a better one at like the store, and then like one store used plastic bags instead of paper bags, and it was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. And I don't know, at Freddy's at least it's free right now.
Yeah, they've made it free for the pandemic, which is great. But if they ever put a feedback on it, it'll be like $5.
Yeah, it's like $5. So.
So worth it.
Yeah, they're like, we don't want you in our store either.
Right? And it's like they can shop way more efficiently. The one thing that sucks though is that Winco doesn't have it.
No,
And
it
Winco
doesn't.
was like our main go-to store for the longest time, but they don't do that. And it's like, you are the ultimate store to do this. You are so well set up for this. Why are you not? It will pay $15. Come on.
Well, my wife and I have talked about, like, because she gets off work at, like, 12:45 if she has to work overtime and 11:30 if she doesn't. But either way, the Winco in Oregon City doesn't get a lot of traffic. And so going that late at night, we figured she could at least only go to the produce area and she could get the produce that she wants and wouldn't have to worry about wanting to, cut the throat of everyone at Fred Meyer every time she gets, a bag of canned goods on top of all of her poorly picked produce.
That's, for sure. Picking off times is at Winco. That's the lovely thing about their 24/7.
I love it.
Yeah, Brandon and I would go at like 10 at night on a Tuesday. Or like 10 at night on a Saturday. We kind of made that a thing for a season. Because it was like everybody else is somewhere other than the grocery store at 10 on a Saturday.
Working an off shift is the best thing for someone with anxiety who isn't super fond of people. I love it.
That's why I worked the night shift. I mean, I closed Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights from basically 6 p.m. till 2 a.m. Which, let me tell you, it's great when everyone knows that you're working those 3 nights. No one's going to invite you to any parties. Like, nope, I'm working. I'll have to come up with any excuses. And then I have the whole rest of my week. The whole Monday through Friday. Well, yeah, basically Monday through Friday off. I have to sleep through most of it, but it's off,
Well,
Yeah.
I had never worked second shift, and my wife suggested we volunteer when they opened a second shift in our department because it would make us look good, and it was only going to be for a couple of months. And I was like, where has this been all my life? I get so much more sleep. I don't know how that happens, but you do. And it's like my sleep schedule for the first time in my life is perfectly cycled because I stay up all night and I sleep past noon. And so it's like exactly the same as on the weekends, and it's glorious.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like we aren't all meant to be the same, like, freaking schedule.
We may be identifying a slight personality type. We're a bunch of very brown and white nerds with anxiety issues who love to read long books and talk about them.
And avoid people.
And avoid people.
Except on the internet, apparently.
Well, I don't know.
Why are you like me?
Why are you in my head, Lutheran?
Yeah.
I mean,
Wouldn't be so bad if you just weren't so insane.
we're also like, you know, coolly practical assholes with occasional bursts of empathy. So, I don't know about you.
Well. No, I actually find that's a remarkably accurate description.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Morgan,
Yes.
I need you to just do a quick summary again of your process in making your podcast, because my jaw kind of dropped when you went through like everything you do to make your content sound good, because I do none of that.
Oh, well, I'm a solo podcaster, so I don't have another person to talk to, so I have to fill a lot of empty space, and so I do a topical podcast, so I have to come up with ideas about different topics, so I take notes about those topics, and so I'll write usually between like 5 and 10 pages of notes, and then I do a rough draft recording where I smoke a little weed because it's good for tangents, and then I'll go through the rough draft notes, and sometimes I'll run off on, you know, different tangents and get really good material that way. And then I'll listen to the rough draft for a couple of days. I'll listen to it several times and take notes on a sticky pad for things that I didn't think of or just different ideas that come to me. And in the meantime, I've run the rough draft through a transcription app and then uploaded the transcription through Google Drive onto a Google Doc. And then I take that Google Doc and basically take those notes and edit them, which is my very least favorite part of it. It's horrible and it takes hours, and then that is my final draft notes, and I record a final draft, and that's why I sound smart. That's what I do.
Wow.
So it turns out hard work pays off, guys.
That's a lot more work than I put in as a solo podcaster. No, that's not true. That's a different amount of work than I put in as a solo podcaster.
My question is, how much editing do you do on that final draft when you record? Is it pretty much you get to sit down and record and you pretty much don't have to cut much?
It depends. Sometimes I have to do, like you were saying, you repeat things over and over again, so like if I'm reading quotes from the book, a lot of times I'll have to say those quotes several times because I'll mess up, or sometimes I just don't say something quite the right way, so I'll trip over my tongue. So yeah, I do a reasonable amount of editing, but like I don't mind the editing part at all, and it takes me far less time than doing the notes. A long time, I would say between 13 and 16 hours an episode, and depending on the episode, some episodes I have to spend a lot of time thinking about. I did an episode called The Breast of the World where I tried to figure out what the fuck is happening at the end of the first book, and that episode was really, really hard. Because it required a lot of thinking and speculating, and that one took a really long time. Anyway, so that's what I do.
That's impressive. I put in a lot of work on researching after I edit, and editing really hard. Or researching after I record, and then I edit really hard. But I also don't try to retread the same ground twice unless I absolutely have to. I've written myself scripts, but it feels wooden. I really like to have some level of off the cuff, but if it's too off the cuff, then it's chaos. So I need some kind of like bullet points, and then I end up reading the book a lot. Like, I still haven't settled on a method, but I spend the majority of my time on fact checking the ever living fuck out of myself. I've had to take out entire points because turns out I was wrong. And I went to fact check so I would have a reference in my show notes because I have big show notes with mine. And it's just like, nope, that was incorrect. So rather than having someone tell me I was wrong, it's just excised.
That's my favorite thing to do in Watt spoilers, is sometimes if you hear like a rough cut, it's like, oh, you know what happened? I ranted for 3 minutes about a point that was completely wrong. And then like, either I'll see that in live recording and the next thing I hear is like, well, that was wrong. So anyway, and I'll make the opposite point, or I'll catch it in the editing and be like, oh, that whole section is just, or I'll misinterpret what someone said to me and then talk for a while about it, and I'll be like, nope. you got that wrong in the moment. So yeah, editing is fun and necessary, especially if you don't want to sound like a complete idiot to thousands of people.
Right? Yeah, especially when you talk about, like, Morgan, like, you're talking about trauma and psychology and all kinds of, like, heavy stuff, not just hot takes about the chapter. Like, I do that with Broken Earth, and there's a certain pressure to at least not stick your foot in your mouth in an egregiously offensive way, right? And there's all this anxiety to be like, okay, is that right? Is that accurate? Is this not actually offensive? Right?
Well, I'm also really lazy about show notes, so I like to be like, I don't actually know what I'm talking about, and I've done lazy internet research about this, so I'm making, lots of supposition because, I'm lazy about that.
The greatest thing about a podcast, there's no university that qualifies you to be a podcaster.
Yeah,
it's also kind of the worst thing about them.
Yeah, it's the Coliseum of public opinion.
Yeah, it's much better than actually having to be a English lit professor. If I had to do that, I would have had to answer to people and publish. Who wants to do that? Like, it's much better where I can say fuck as much as I want. I don't have to answer to anyone, and I don't have a schedule to keep. It's just nice. It's less pressure.
Let me sing you the song of my people.
But isn't it funny, though, how much we want to be alone and we want to have our own opinions? And for some reason, we also want to do that in public. And we go through all this effort to do this in public because ranting into a actual closet isn't any fun. We're actually ranting at the internet in public. And somehow that gives us something. What the fuck is up with that?
I blame the school system that has trained us to absolutely seek return and reward for our opinions. The gold star, the 100%, this is a really good paper. Yeah, the validation that we've been given our whole lives is something that once you get out of school, you go to these jobs and they're like, yeah, here's a pile of work, get it done and don't fuck up. And we lose that validation, and I think those of us that are... perhaps maybe were raised in a way that was praised as gifted, have trouble giving up that validation when we become adults.
So, introverted narcissist is what you're saying.
Yeah, you're calling us all self-centered, very narcissistic.
How many of us are currently staring into a black mirror?
Okay, well, mine's fairly bright with windows, technically, so...
So I admit to having a smidge of narcissism. I've always figured that it was probably good that I have, body image issues, or I'd be one of those horrible people that would be like, of course you want to fuck me, I'm perfect. So, it's like...
I gotta compensate.
I've got to have at least some things I feel self-conscious about. So...
Well, for me... I wanted to be an actress from day one. My desire to be on stage flagged briefly when I decided that professional acting wasn't for me, but my aggressive desire to just be the center of things is definitely a lifelong trait. Yeah, there's something to be said for just being I'm smart and I'm self-centered and oh look, people enjoy that. So how about fuck off, internal critical voice.
Yeah, I'm an only child with a mom who told me that I was, really great, and then a whole bunch of school peers who told me I really sucked, so I was sort of trying to balance that out, and I mean, it made me humble, so it's I want to put out something quality, so if people tell me that it's good, I appreciate hearing it. it's also like I like to talk about the Wheel of Time. I really love it, and being able to talk about it and talk about it intelligently, because there's a lot of good stuff in it, and then hearing from people say, I never thought about that before, or that really affected me because of X, Y, or Z, or I've heard a lot people say, I really appreciate the empathy that, you put into it. You have a lot of empathy for the characters, and, that means a lot. So it's just, I don't know, I feel like people, a lot of podcasters just have a lot to contribute to their podcast because people want to hear content. And so, I guess we're doing good work.
People keep listening, so I guess so.
As long as you keep listening, we'll keep making it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Speaking of which, I wanted to sort of update people on the new Patreon. Do you think just do a quick minute or two on that?
Yeah.
Me and Aradia sat down, just updated the language a little bit. We are working on new artwork to send out, so we could do new buttons where there's going to be just a second version of that. But you know how artists are; they're slow.
They don't observe normal time.
No, and it's as always, it's happening. A volunteer, the same person who created the artwork is working on the new version of it.
It's a new phase of the podcast in a lot of senses with respect to the narrative and the hosts. So it's a good time for new art.
So relaunching Patreon, I sort of took a relook at the Patreon levels, and they didn't make a lot of sense. There was a $3 and $5 level that were essentially exactly the same, and we had names for two of them, so there were like 4 levels that were essentially all the same. And I just wanted to condense them a little bit. I also wanted to give an option for better merch, and so I went ahead and let Patreon fulfill that. So that way you don't have to wait on me to get on my lazy ass to send out the better merch. The stickers you'll still have to wait on me to send out, but you can actually donate at a higher level and get some nicer merch sent to you directly from Patreon. Now, I want to talk about what those levels represent, because they really are the reward that you get back. You don't have to donate at any one of those levels. If you want to donate more or less per month, you can always put in a custom amount. That's just sort of the reward tier you're going to end up at, because that's what I can afford to send you at that donation level, if that makes sense. If you got a ping on that, or if you saw something going on, feel free to check it out. If you were on one of the old tiers, you can stay at one of the old tiers, but if you're jumping into Patreon for the first time, you got to be on one of the new ones. Or you can, as always, donate at a custom level if you'd like. Or, and this is especially for those of you who are here live. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because I know you were all donors.
Yes. Yeah, if anything changed in a bad way for you somehow because of us unpublishing the levels, let us know. It should be fine. I read a lot of FAQs to make sure that would be fine, but if it's not fine, let us know. We'll figure it out. And hopefully, someone gets some new merch soon and lets us know how cool it is, because letting Patreon do it is, it eases some anxieties, but increases others. So we'll see.
Part of it is I don't have a quality control on the merch before it goes out. I think it's going to be nice, but, shrug.
At the price that they're asking for it, it should be nice.
It should be. Yeah.
Put it that way.
We're putting those rewards at the suggested levels.
And we've also added goals. We've added new goals.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. That's the exciting part, really, for me.
We had it was for a long time at 1,500, and we decided to add some higher levels. So if you guys can get us up to, at $2,000, we're going to start doing some rough cuts. At $3,000, we're going to do a marathon of New Spring. And at $4,000, we're going to do something awesome, because it will be a milestone. We don't know what we're going to do yet. And there might be other random things we do, surprisingly, along the way as we continue to grow. So go check out our Patreon, and maybe possibly we'll even interact with you on that platform, because it turns out it's kind of a cool platform.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?